Since 2001, Coventry City fans must be wondering if their football club is cursed. Relegated as far as League 2, financial issues, dodgy owners, eviction and ground shares outside of Coventry. And now they have the unpleasant taste of Mike Ashley's name on their lips as he evicts them from their own home. It's time to turn this once great club's fortunes around. Let's rebuild Coventry City. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are kicking off with the first of a 5-part series where we're going to be taking on possibly the most unlucky club in England. Yes, Coventry City have been through the mill. If anything could happen to a football club, it's possibly happened to Coventry. They've had a fall from grace going from the Premier League to League 2. They've had financial difficulties. They've had bad owners. They've even been evicted from their own ground and were having to do ground shares at one point. And now they have suffered the unfortunate taste of Mike Ashley on their tongues. Yes, he has bought the home that they currently reside in, the Coventry Building Society Arena, and has decided they don't have a future there unless they pay him lots of money, and have evicted them once again. So we are going to aim to turn those fortunes around. Coventry surely cannot go through any more heartache. Once they get their things sorted out in real life, hopefully they will start to be established again as a football team that is on the up. But luckily for us in FM23, we haven't reached the point where Mike Ashley is about to kick us out of our own home. And we're going to start on the 27th of June 2022. And we're going to look to start rebuilding Coventry City. So here's a brief little run through of who they are. So as you can see, they are a 3-star reputation national team with a 3-star finances, which are okay, which I find hard to believe considering everything that's gone on in the club's history and recent past. They have a 3.5-star training facility, 3.5-star youth facilities, a 1-star junior coaching and a 1-star youth recruitment. They're estimated to be valued at £18.4 million, which is pretty decent for a championship team that's just been promoted. Their year founded was 1883, so a lot of proud history at the football club. Looking at their key players, Liam Kelly is our club captain, Gustavo Hamer is our key player, and our hot prospect is Will Bapaga. At the start of the save, we are going to go to our assistant manager. We're going to ask him to put together what he feels is our best 11 for the upcoming season. Now, we have picked the tactic that he has moulded that 11 to, and he has gone with Moore in goal, Panzo at left back, Rose, McFadzean and Dabo. We've then got Hamer and Allen in the middle, with Goyokeres, O'Hare and Waghorn as the attacking three, with Godden at the top of the pitch. Now, picking some of the strengths and weaknesses that he has also highlighted, McFadzean and Rose show a good understanding when playing together at the back. Sheaf and Allen have formed a good partnership in the centre of the pitch. Goyokeres and Godden have shown a good understanding up top, forming a potent partnership when played together. Youth prospects, there are a number of talented prospects including Burrows, Reed, Lusala. Looking at the weaknesses though, we have a balance of 0, we'll tell you why in a second, which means no transfers for the first part of the season. A balance of 0 in the wage budget leaves limited options. There's not a great deal of depth outside of the club, which means that the first team is basically where our quality ends. There are questions about marking, handling for the goalkeepers, one-on-ones, positioning, jumping reach. There are some major setbacks with the team, but there are some good strengths too. So we have something to work with at least at the start of the save. A brief overview of the first team shows probably why our assistant manager does think that there is a little bit of lack of quality within the squad and the squad depth. We do have 3 goalkeepers on the book, that is fine. We have a good number of defenders, but not great quality defenders. We have a lot of players in the centre of the park for the midfield positions, and again, there are some players there that are ageing and can probably be upgraded once we can sign some players. And as for the attacking units, we have a good number of players who can come in off of the wings. We have a few younger players in there and a few players that I would really like to move on. And at the top of the pitch, we have Godden and Walker. So hopefully we will get some goals from them 2 players. This is the tactic I've decided to use for this rebuild series. It's going to be called the Cov 4-2-3-1. It's basically a tactic where I'm looking to be defensively sound whilst also having enough players higher up the pitch to cause our opponents some damage. Running through the positions, we have a sweeper keeper, we've got inverted wing backs, we have an RPM and a Mazzala, we have 2 inverted wingers, a shadow striker and a pressing forward at the top of the pitch to hopefully hassle and harry players that are going to to try and bring the ball out from the back. If we choose our best 11 at the club at the moment and show you what that will look like, obviously some of our players are away, but again, if they slot into the tactic perfectly, this is what at current moment our best 11 should be. So going against what our assistant manager thinks, you've got Moore in goal, Bidwell at left back, McFadzean, Rose and Dabo. Then there's Hamer and Sheaf, with Gyökeres, O'Hare and Waghorn, and Godden at the top of the pitch. Looking at the club vision, the board want us to become a top half finishing side for the first season. They want to be competitive in the FA Cup and also be competitive in the EFL Cup. The only other actionable objectives that the board have, they want us to work within the wage budget, and in terms of their board culture, they want us to develop players using the club's youth system. Now, considering our assistant manager believes we have a number of good youth prospects, that is probably a good place to start. In terms of the supporters, they want us to be competitive against Aston Villa if we play them, be competitive against Leicester if we play them, and record an EFL Championship top half finish. So that matches up with the board. So our main first objective is going to be to crack the top half of the Championship. The last thing to touch on before we jump to the end of the first season is to show you what is happening with the finances at the start of the game. Now you can see Coventry only have a balance of £2 million. All those in real life issues affecting them off the pitch have kind of rolled into the game. So looking at the transfer budget to see zero is probably what you would expect anyway. But for the purposes of all of these rebuilds, I always turn off that first transfer window transfer activity. I think it's only fair to get to know your squad, give them a chance to make a good impression, to see which players you are going to want to retain after that first transfer window. And by the time we get to January, then you can start to influence the team as to how you want it. Now, when we get to January, the budget will probably still be zero unless we sell a few players on. So it's probably going to be a struggle in the first season anyway. And as I said, we're spending all of that wage budget, so it's going to be difficult to manoeuvre money around, because I'm pretty sure we've got a lot of players who are coming to the end of their contract at the end of the first season, and they're going to want to have pay rises and bonuses and things that we can't afford. So that's a brief introduction into the club and how the rebuild is going to work. Let's jump to the end of that first season and show you exactly how we've got on in the first season of the Coventry City Rebuild. We have jumped forwards to the end of the first season. It's the 1st of June 2023, and you can see that we have hit our main objective by finishing in the top half of the Championship. We have finished in 11th place, scoring 66 points from 46 games. We'll break it down a little bit more in just a second, but the other competitions, the FA Cup, we were knocked out in the third round by Chelsea of that, and the Carabao Cup, we were knocked out in the first round by Warsaw. Considering we started off with a club balance of only £2 million and nothing available to us in transfers in that first window, in the January window we were actually able to get some business done. Most of the players that we let go of were loans, so we had the likes of Tom Bilson join Grimsby, Dermy Lusala join Exeter, there was Marco Roos went to Dynamo Bucharest, we had McGrath, Shepherd, Turaj and Blaine Rowe all go out on loan too, and they are youth team players that need to get that next step in their career, so first team football is vital to them. The only deal that we did for a permanent transfer might come back to bite us. We needed cash and we needed it quick, so Wilbur Paga was a player who had some interest in him. Everton came to us with a bid of £200,000 overall, £145,000 up front, and it was one of those, do we take it in the short term and try and rebuild the team now, or do we hold on to the player and potentially upset him, not letting him go? He actually ended up asking to leave, so we allowed the deal to go through for 145,000, rising to 200,000. But part of the deal was we got him back till the end of the season, and he actually helped us to win some games. So it was kind of a win-win for both parties. With the money that we actually picked up, we didn't spend a lot of it because we had to convert some into wage budget so we could keep the likes of Gustavo Hamer and put him on the kind of wages that he wanted at the end. But we did do some free business. So Ronaldo Turaj was the first player that came in. You can see he's a former Tottenham player. He went out on loan, as I said, to get some first team experience once he had come in. Jalen Wildbohr, he is a player who used to play for Fulham, played for Burton Albion also. Again, these are players that we are just looking to kind of develop for the future and maybe get them in now and sell them on for a profit later on. We had Jordan Ado Antoine, who was picked up by our scouts, recommended to us. We've picked him up and then sent him out on loan to try and get some first team football to develop him. He has some good attributes for a wing back in terms of pace, acceleration, tackling, so maybe a bright prospect there at the age of 19. We got Wilbur Pagger back on loan, and then the players that we actually purchased, we spent an entire £17,000 on transfers. The first player was Adam Randall, used to play for Torquay and Plymouth. He came in and actually did a pretty good job as a rotation piece in our central midfield. He has some decent stats for who he is, and again, he's another one that we've signed for a little amount of money and kind of looking at moving him on potentially if we can get somebody better in the summer for season 2, but it was just a no-brainer. He was on the transfer list for that kind of money. We picked him up. And the other player that we picked up was MJ Williams, another £9,000 spent here, and again, 27 years old, former Liverpool, Rochdale, Blackpool and Bolton player, who again was just a player brought in to give us a bit of depth in the middle of the park. We had a few injuries across the season which held us back, and these are the kinds of players that came in and were able to just be in and around the squad to try and help out. And the final transfer that we made was Jackson Conway on a free transfer. This is a player I've had my eye on in real life. He plays for Atlanta United and has come through their academy. He has a good goal scoring record for Atlanta's second team, and when he was available on a free transfer, it was a no-brainer to just go out and pick him up. 21 years old, USA youth player. I think he has a bright prospect at the club if he can settle in the country. So that's all the transfer business that we did. As I said, 17,000 spent, 145,000 was recouped in that one deal in January. The finances have started to look a little bit healthier heading into season 2. We now have £6.4 million in the bank. £700,000 of that will be available to us to spend on transfers. That's pretty decent. I didn't expect to have that kind of money considering we only had 2 million at the start of the season, so we're going to have to go out and do a bit of wheeling dealing and try and get as many players in for that 700,000 as we can. We have £150,060 as a wage budget per week. We're currently spending £148,456 of that, but committed spending is only £110,000. There are quite a number of first team players that we wouldn't renew contracts of because I didn't think that they had a future at the club. So it's going to be interesting what money we have available going forwards. Can I invest it wisely? The other problem that we do have is this club is constantly in and out of takeovers. I think we had 2 or 3 bids submitted during the first season which prevented us from signing players initially at the start of January, and then once that cleared off, it was kind of back to work, and then a new person come in with a bid and we didn't know whether we were going to have a job or not, but luckily we're still here heading into season 2. Looking at the board's satisfaction at the end of season 1 then, working within the wage budget, we are on course with that. Grow the club's reputation, that is going to be difficult because we are not signing the players that we need to sign to help that happen, if that makes sense. The results on the pitch are the only way we're going to be able to do it, and the players that we have at the moment aren't the right players to push the club forwards, but we're going to work on that. Minimum 1-year contracts for players over the age of 34. We're trying to trim the squad of those kinds of players anyway. Maximum 2-year contracts for players over the age of 32. Again, we're trying to reduce the average age of the squad, promote from within like the club wanted, and also kind of weed out the high earners who aren't pulling their weight at the club. Minimum 2-year contracts for first team players. Now that is applying to everybody under the age of 30 really. Anybody who's been promoted are getting 2-year contracts. So for the next season, they want us to become an established championship team, which is fine. We finished mid-table, so that should be achievable, and be competitive in the EFL Cup. Our contract will be expiring at the end of the season, so that will be up for renewal. In terms of the board feedback from the first season, we got a C+. The board were pleased with the management of the team. They want us now to develop players using the club's youth system and sign players under the age of 23 for the first team. Now, obviously, we are losing quite a lot of the veteran players at the club, so getting players under the age of 23, they're going to need some kind of figurehead or mentors at the club, so it's going to be a fine balance as to whether we can achieve that at the first time of asking. Highlights: pleased with the quality of pressing when using a Geigenpress style, pleased with the 2-0 championship victory against Birmingham, which obviously is a local rival, so they were happy with that. And pleased with the 1-1 draw against Blackburn. Disappointed about a 2-0 defeat to QPR and a 2-1 defeat to Middlesbrough. Looking quickly at the supporters, we get a C+ from the supporters. They want us to strive to make progress on and off the pitch, be competitive against Villa and Leicester if we happen to play them. They were pleased with the quality of the pressing with the Geigen press style, pleased with the 2-0 victory against Birmingham, and pleased with the 1-1 draw against Reading. They're disappointed about the 2-0 defeat against QPR, and they've been disappointed with Casey Palmer and Jamie Allen's performances. Now, Casey Palmer and Jamie Allen are two players that I think are going to be leaving the club shortly, so hopefully once they leave we can start to turn that one around anyway. Let's have a little breakdown then of how Season 1 ended in terms of the Championship. So our main aim was to get as a top half of the table team, and we have achieved that just. 11th was our position. There are 24 teams. Obviously, we could have finished 11th or 12th, but we just about crept in. We got 66 points from our 46 games, and that was with us winning 19 games. We had 9 draws. We had 18 losses. We scored 78 goals, so we did have a fair amount of goals from our players. The only problem is we had a leaky defence and we conceded 70 goals. So we only finished on an 8-goal difference across the entire season and on 66 points. So not the best return from the first season, but I did say it was going to be difficult considering we weren't expected really to do anything in the league, and also we didn't really have the squad depth to be able to challenge consistently. Once we had a bit of fatigue and a few injuries, it kind of fell apart at places, but we did hold our own where we could. Looking at the rest of the Championship then, so you've got Watford, Norwich and Blackburn getting promoted. Who got relegated? Stoke, Swansea and Preston. So we finished far enough away from the relegation zone, 31 points ahead of Preston, and we finished around 28 points, I think that is, 27 points off of Watford. So we are truly a mid-table team, which is exactly where we wanted to be anyway. So looking at a few player stats then, so Godden actually managed to get 23 league goals. Timu Pukki leading the way for Norwich. He's a bit of a god in this league because obviously he can play in the Premier League. But yeah, Godden getting 23 goals is quite impressive for us. In terms of the average ratings, I don't think we've got anybody ranking anywhere in that. Wasn't a good season for our average ratings. In terms of assists, did we have anybody there? So we got Dinanga, he got 10 assists. We had Gustavo Hamer with 9 assists and Goyokeres with 9 assists. Also, did we have Player of the Match awards? Let's have a look. Matt Godden getting 5 Player of the Match awards, which is quite a decent return for him. Clean sheets, as you saw, our defence was quite leaky, so not surprisingly we don't have more on the clean sheets. We had quite a lot of yellow cards, 20 for Dabo, 17 for Panzo. We had Reed covering 14.99 kilometres per 90 minutes. We had Dabo with 3.18 tackles per 90 minutes. And did we have dribbles per 90 minutes? We had Dabo in 8th and Callum Doyle in 13th. Jonathan Panzo scraping in 20th place there. So that's a brief overview of how the Championship went. Just again to cover the rest of the competitions. We got knocked out in the 3rd round of the FA Cup by Chelsea, and we got knocked out in the 1st round by Warsaw in the Carabao Cup. The final thing to look at the end of Season 1 is what the squad will look like. Now, we're going to start off by looking at the players that are going to be leaving the club at the end of the season. We have quite a lot of players here who have contracts that are expiring that should never have got those contracts anyway. You have players like Martin Waghorn, whoever put him on £7,500 at Coventry. No, we have Tyler Walker on 5,500. We have Dabo on 5,000. You have Julian DeCosta on 5,500. So those are players that really we're going to look to move off of the books. Once their contracts expire, we just are going to let them go because there's no real value in them. Nobody wants to buy them, but we can get that money off of the wage bill and try and get players in and maybe pay that 7,500 that Waghorn's getting to 2 or 3 players. So a full rundown of the players whose contracts will expire is Liam Kelly, Carl McFadzean, Martin Waghorn, Ben Wilson, Fanaxi Dabo, Tyler Walker, Josh Eccles. Jack Burrows is down on the list as his contract expiring, but I think we will look at him because he was one of the players that was recommended to us as a young prospect to watch. Dinanga did perform well during the season. Don't think he really fits in with my way of playing and the way that I see the club going. Julian Da Costa will go. Michael Rose, Luke Bell, Wilbur Pagger will be going back to Everton now he's their player. And then we have a whole host of players whose contract will end the following season. So we'll look at what we can do with them, because there's quite a lot of high earners in that bracket too. The last thing to look at then is how our starting 11 might look. If we go to our best 11, so 2 different versions of the best 11 in the squad planner. So this is our current first team with everybody in it that is still going to be at the club at this moment in time, but probably won't be for next season. So we're finishing with Moore in goal, Bidwell, McFadzean, Rose and Dabo, Hamer, Ben Sheaf, Waghorn, O'Hare, Gyökeres and Matt Godden. So looking at just that first 11, players that probably will not be at the club are Dabo, McFadzean, Waghorn. Hamer, we had to try and renew his contract because he is he's head and shoulders above everybody else. We really do need to keep him. Looking at the assistant report version of it, we've got Moore, Bidwell, McFadzean, Rose, Dabo, Hamer, Sheaf, Gyökeres, O'Hare, Waghorn, and then Godden up top. So we have a big rebuild job to come in the summer. We have £700,000 to spend, which is a relief, because spending £17,000 in January buying 2 players who really were just an option. They were just bodies that we needed for squad depth reasons. It was not the best, but it gives us bright hope going into season 2 that we can start to move the club forwards. Our next aim is to finish higher than 11th, maybe try and crack just at the bottom of where the playoffs are and try and scrape in maybe through the back door. And then obviously, if we were to do that, I would not want us to get promoted, because the team will just not be in a position to be challenging once we get anywhere in and around the playoffs. Certainly if we was to get promoted, we would just get relegated straight away. So it's a building block. It's something to start with. Season 1 is complete. Before revealing how we have got on in Season 2, the first thing I want to touch upon is some transfers. And as I said, we had quite a lot of players who were coming to the end of their contract, a few older first-teamers who weren't going to be given new deals. We were losing quite a lot of the squad. We had £700,000 to play with, so we were having to do a bit of wheeling dealing. You'll see exactly how it breaks down here. So the first thing that we did was had the players that had their contracts expire. So George Burrows went to Airdrie, Liam Kelly went to Aberdeen, Dinanga went to Bologna, we had Julian Da Costa go to Reims, Dabo went to Cardiff and Eccles went to Luton. We sent Dermy Lusala out on loan once again to Exeter and Jay McGrath to Scunthorpe, and we finally then started to move players on for money. Victor Gyökeres, this was one that I didn't really want to do. The offer came in and I thought, it's £2.9 million that we're not going to have in the short term. Let's just cash in on what we've got. He's obviously a player who is probably a little bit too good to play for Coventry anyway, so I fear that at some point he's going to ask to move on. So we took the deal, took the £2.9 million and added it to our £700,000. We sold Danny Cashman to Morecambe. Jake Bidwell ended up going to Rotherham, a player who wasn't really going to be involved in the first team, a left-sided player. He did play games for us, but in the long term I think it was the right deal to take the cash on him. We also sent Blaine Lowe, Marco Roos, Casey Palmer, Alfie Gilchrist and Isaac Price out on loan. We have Callum O'Hare. He ended up going to Blackburn, another one that somewhere down the line I think he would have been asking to leave anyway, and when the deal came up just to move him on and get that cash in the bank, we just took the opportunity to do that deal there and then. Finally, we have Oliver Tipton, Ben Sheaf and Riley Siddle all going out on loan. Walsall, Barnsley and Dagenham and Redbridge are their destinations. So we did manage to make £3.2 million of extra transfer funds for ourselves. And then we come across the left-hand side of the screen. Now, as I said, we were having to do some wheeling dealing. Luckily for us, in the crossover of seasons, we know that the bigger teams are going to start to release some players. So we went in and started to poach those free transfers quite early on in the game. We're getting deals done that we needed to do quite early so we could start to really rebuild this squad. So the first player that we signed was Adam Lewis. Former Liverpool player, has come to us via Livingston, Newport County, can play anywhere on the left-hand side of the pitch, can also play through the middle. So that versatility of being able to play in different positions is something that is going to be good for us. Maybe not an out-and-out first teamer, but somebody who in the future, I think, if he's called upon, he can just step into wherever we need him. Charlie Wellens was the next player, comes to us via Oldham, has played for Manchester United, obviously playing for us now. He's 21 years old. The good thing with all of these young players that we're buying on free transfers is that they may have sell-on potential further on up the line, so it'd be decent if we could get some money back for Charlie Wellens. Lee Harkin was the next one, comes to us from Wolverhampton Wanderers, can play on the left, can play on the right, can play up top, has 13 pace and 14 acceleration, so decent stats for us if we need a piece to just plug in when our first teamers are tired. We signed Ryan Astley. He has come to us from Accrington Stanley, played for Everton, and now obviously plays for us. Another one, not 100% sure he's going to be a first teamer, but 22 years old. He is worth £750,000 if we wanted to move him on. He's 6 foot tall, can play as a central defender and a no-nonsense centre-back, so will fit into our system. Alex Robertson was the next one up. He has played for Manchester United, Ross County, Manchester City, and then comes to us this season. I think he's a good purchase in that in-between where he's probably not good enough to be Premier League quality, but he's good enough for the Championship, which is why City let him go. Again, valued at £750,000, so if it doesn't work out and we move him on, we are going to make some money from him. The next player is Ethan Galbraith. He has played for Manchester United, Doncaster, Salford, and then comes to us. He is a central midfielder, plays anywhere through the middle, so attacking midfield centre and a defensive midfielder. Northern Irish, 23 years old, has made 8 appearances for the Northern Ireland first team, so an international coming to the club. Jack Hinchy is up next. He has been at Brighton and Stockport. Maybe not one who is going to be a first teamer out and out, but a squad player who can just pack it together and give us a little bit of depth and an option in the middle for, say, a cup game or a non-important league game. We signed Tyler Roberts on a free transfer from Wolverhampton Wanderers. Another player who can play left side, right side and through the middle. 14 pace, 15 acceleration and 12 dribbling are the main reasons for that purchase. Jamie Bowden has come to us. He's there in the Tottenham shirt. He's also played for Oldham and Luton. Another player who has versatility, can play as a defensive midfielder or a midfielder in the centre. Can also play as a centre-back. He's 5'9", so pretty decent size for a midfielder, not so great for a centre-back. Jack Jenkins, he's a former Leeds United and Salford player. He is 22 years old, can play as a midfielder, a defensive midfielder or an attacking midfielder, and one who I think could be on the fringes of the first team quite quickly. I think he has something about him and could break in and have a game here or there. We then have Isaac Price, who we know we've already loaned out. He's a 20-year-old Northern Irish player who has come to us from Everton. He has now gone out on loan to Accrington. At 20 years old, I think there's a lot more to come from him. Plays naturally on the left, can also play through the middle of the park. We have got a lot more names to cover. We missed one off there. Ethan Wadi. He's a former Chelsea goalkeeper. He's played for Hendon, Woking, and then comes to us basically as a rotation piece. 22 years old. We rarely get injuries to goalkeepers on the game, but he's very much a backup. We have Alfie Gilchrist. He's a player who comes from Chelsea. Has been out on loan at Lincoln, getting some game time there and some experience, so hopefully he'll come back to us a better player. Who else have we got? We have got Tyrrell Ashcroft. He is a right back who can play up the right hand side, can also cover as a centre back. His estimated cost is £2.3 to £3.7 million, so a decent enough signing if we need to move him on. Previously played for Reading, Tottenham and Forest Green. Who else do we have? Dominic Cornes is pictured there in a Liverpool shirt. He has played for Liverpool. Plays as a left-sided player, can also play through the middle of the park. Bit of a versatile player, 21 years old. Hopefully a lot more development to come for him. We have Taylor Foran. He is a centre-back who used to play for Arsenal. 6'4" is a good height. He has good jumping reach, heading and tackling. So as a former Arsenal player, he's a decent young prospect. I think he could end up getting into the first team quite regularly in the future. We have Lee Jonas, almost there for the free transfers, I promise. Lee Jonas is another centre-back, 6 foot tall, used to play for Liverpool. Again, not really going to be a first teamer, but he has a bright future at the age of 19. And if it doesn't work out, £950,000 is the upper range of his value. We have Lewis Gibson, former player who was playing for Bristol Rovers, but he has played for Reading, Everton and Sheffield Wednesday. 23 years old, comes in valued at £7 to £7.6 million. He's a centre-back, 6'1". He's a bit of a no-nonsense player, really. Wide centre-back, central defender, ball-playing defender, no-nonsense centre-back, and a libero. Can play any of those positions naturally. So again, another young player who, if it doesn't work out, we should be making money off of him. We have Oliver Tipton, who we know we have already loaned out. He's another centre-back, 20 years old, comes to us from Wolves, has played for Walsall on loan this season. Any more free transfers? Kellen Watts. Kellen Watts is a player who was playing for Newcastle, has played for Plymouth, Wigan and Peterborough. 24 years old, 6'4". He's a rock solid centre back who will go straight into the first team. It does state there he can play as a left back too. Not really where we want him as a 6'4" player. Valued at £4.5 to £5 million. So if he can play well, we keep him, and if he doesn't, again, it's one of those we can sell on. And the final free transfer of this portion is Laurent Tolaj. Now, I think this is a really shrewd signing. Come to us from, well, he's played for Brighton, played for Cambridge, played for Salford, and he now joins us. He has 14 finishing, he has 14 pace, 13 acceleration. I think he's a really good Championship striker. We have plugged him in at the top of the formation, and he seems to be flying at the club so far. And then we started to sign some of the money using the players, or the transfer money that we had got from players we had sold. The first of the money purchases was John Patrick. He is a attacking midfielder who can play on the left or the right, can also play as a makeshift striker. He's Irish, but comes to us from Getafe. He's 6'4", so quite tall to be a winger, but he does have 14 pace, 16 acceleration to go with it, and has a nice price tag of £8 to £9.4 million. We then signed Joan Puig. He's a left back who comes to us from a Spanish club. I think it's... So he's officially come to us from Espanyol, but I don't think he was there. So Badalonia Foot or Costa Brava, I think, was the previous team that he had actually played for. I think he was on loan somewhere else, but he's a player that we've bought in. We've spent some cash on. He's valued at £325 to £900,000. 6'2" left back, 21 years old. And I think he should settle in quite nicely as one of our first teamers. We have Jonathan Gomez. He plays left or right back, so a player, again, versatile, can play on either side. He's a USA international. Valued at £5.8 to £6.6 million. So a shrewd signing if that one works out. We then signed Agner for £675,000. Don't know how he popped up on our scouting report, but our scouts were familiar with a 19-year-old Brazilian who is 6'1" and plays through the middle of the park, either as an attacking advanced playmaker or a central midfielder. So a shrewd signing for the future there. We then went and got Julimar, another Brazilian player with 14 finishing, 12 pace, 13 acceleration. So you can see that we're really building the squad up now. So we've got some strikers, we've got some wingers, signing defenders, getting Brazilians. It's really starting to come together. We went back to Brighton. We signed Ben Jackson. He's a centre-back, one for the future maybe, 20 years old, tackling of 12, jumping reach 14, acceleration of 13 and pace of 12. Came in just as a youngster, so one that we are developing for the future. And then we're getting to the end, I promise. We signed another Brazilian on a free transfer. This one's Leandrinho. Plays on the left-hand side primarily. Can be a striker too. 25 years old, valued at 6.4 to 8.4 million pounds. And I think he is a shrewd acquisition. And then the last two players we signed was Greg Ollie. He has come into us from Bolton, but he's also played at Hull and Newcastle. Definitely just a rotation option at the age of 28. I think he's a player that will step in for cup games if we need him. And then the final player that we signed was another Brazilian, Julio Cesar. He's an attacking midfielder who plays with the centre or as a striker. He has 15 pace, 14 acceleration, 14 finishing and 14 dribbling. So hopefully that is enough players for us to try and mould the squad to how we want. Spent 2.5 million. We recouped 3.2 million. So we have a profit overall, which is probably why the club are pleased in terms of the transfer business that we have done. The free transfers, some of them are for the future, some of them are for now, but I think in terms of building the squad, it was a successful transfer window. A quick overview of the competitions reveals that we have finished in 9th place, once again finishing above a mid-table team. Brighton ended up winning the championship with Hull, Sunderland and Middlesbrough at the top of the table. We finished 9th on 74 points, so an improvement on last season. We were knocked out in the third round of the FA Cup by Bristol City and in the first round of the Carabao Cup by Sheffield United. We'll come back and recap exactly what happened in the leagues in just a minute. After spending money then on the transfers that we brought in to the club, this is how the finances look. There is £3.4 million now as the overall balance, and there is £686,000 available to us to spend for Season 3. Now, obviously, we had a major overhaul of the playing squad at the end of Season 2. It could end up happening again where we just go and smash the free transfer markets and maybe try and buy just one or two cash players. But, having said that, £686,000, if we wheel and deal again, there is enough there for us to go and buy enough quality, I think, to be challenging in Season 3 for at least the playoffs. The wage budget is £216,000 per week. We're only spending £200,000 of it, so we have a good amount there in the kitty for wages. A quick look at the club vision reveals that once again we are in the process of a takeover bid. Whether it'll go through or not this time, I don't know. I think that's about the 317th time that there's been a bid or something happening with a takeover. But looking at what the board's long-term visions and expectations are, they want us to work within the wage budget. We're well on course with that and grow the club's reputation. They're satisfied with that. Moving from 11th to 9th, it's not earth-shattering, but we are moving in the right direction at least. Maximum 1-year contracts for the players over the age of 34. We're still not really signing players over the age of 34, and if we have to renew, it's only because they're star players, and it's only if the wages work out for the budget we have. Minimum 2-year contracts for first-team players, we're hitting that. By the end of next season now, they want us to reach the playoffs, so the board are starting to get more ambitious, and they want to be competitive in the EFL Cup, which is disappointing for them because we've been out in the first round the last 2 seasons. Looking at the board then, their feedback is C+ in terms of our job. Our job security is stable. The board culture now, they just want to develop players using the club's youth system still. So I think at this point we're going to start looking at what players have come through. We've had a few players out on loan that we're trying to develop, and hopefully now we can bring some players into the first team. Notable highlights: pleased with the quality of the pressing from the Geigen press. Happy with the finances involved with the deal to loan out Riley Siddle, and pleased with the comfortable 4-1 victory against QPR. They are disappointed with the 3-1 loss against Sunderland, disappointed with the 2-0 loss against Blackpool, and disappointed with the 3-1 loss against Hull City. Switching to the supporters then, we have a C+ from them too. They want to strive to make progress on and off the pitch. Still want to be competitive against Villa and Leicester if we play them. They're happy with the Geigen press. They're pleased with the decision to send Riley Siddle out on loan. And they're pleased with the comfortable 4-1 championship humbling of QPR. They are disappointed though with the defeat against Sunderland. Gustavo Hamer's recent performances. Again, he's been locked in a dispute about contracts. He had a contract, he still wants a new contract, so it's been ongoing for a little while. He's going to sign a new contract, I believe, so we are going to have him for the next season, but it's been ongoing, so I think it's affected his performances, and they're disappointed about a 2-0 defeat to Blackpool. Let's go back then and break down the championship season that happened in season 2. So we finished in 9th place. We played 46 games. We won 21 of those. We drew 11. We lost 14. We scored 80 goals this season, but did concede 67. And even though we had a +8 last season, we have a +13 goal difference this season, but we do have 8 more points, finishing on 74. So we finished 21 points behind Brighton, who won the league. And looking that they want us to be a playoff team, Ipswich, I think, are that team. And we are 8 points behind them. So we are making steady progress and steady steps forward. We are miles clear now of the relegation zone. And I don't think that is where we will be looking. I mean, if you look at the form at the end here, we actually dropped off at the end of the season. After we beat QPR, we had a 2-2 draw with Sheffield Wednesday, and then we lost the last 3 games of the season. So if we had a bit of momentum at the end of the season, we could have actually been a bit closer to Ipswich at that end of the table in 6th place. So to think that we finished on 74 points and Sheffield United finished on 81 is actually a pretty good season overall. If we look at the profile of the league and go to the league table there, again, as I said, Brighton, Hull, Sunderland and Middlesbrough are in for a chance of promotion. So Brighton and Hull going up automatically, Sunderland and Middlesbrough in the playoff final. And then at the bottom we've got Millwall, Portsmouth and Sheffield Wednesday getting relegated. If we look at some of the stats for goals, our top goal scorer was Talage with 17. Didn't have anybody else on that screen. In terms of the average ratings, we had Kelland Watts. He was in 4th place with a 7.18 average rating. Lewis Gibson with a 7.11. Looking at assists, we have Gustavo Hamer as our top assister on 9. We also have Fabio Tavares on 7. Player of the Match awards, let's have a little look there. Kellen Watts leading the way with 4 for us. Clean sheets, I don't think we're going to feature on there. Simon Moore actually did finish joint 12th with 12 clean sheets, so not that bad. Yellow cards, we have Hamer on 18 and Watts on 14, so maybe we need to look at stepping back the tackling a little bit there. Jenkins finished on 15.03 kilometres per 90 minutes. Nobody in the tackles or the dribbles per 90 minutes. Rounding out the rest of the competitions once again then. So knocked out in the 3rd round by Bristol City in the FA Cup and knocked out in the 1st round by Sheffield United in the Carabao Cup. To round out season 2 then, we're going to have a quick look at the best 11s, starting off with this version, which is Adi Vivesh, who is our assistant manager. So he thinks our best 11 is Moore in goal, Gomez, Gibson, Watts, Ashcroft, Hamer, Randall, Leandrinho, Agner, John Patrick on the right with Talage up top. And luckily in this view you get to see what they think our best youth 11 would be. Considering we have some good youth prospects at the club, these are some of the names you might be seeing in the near future. So we've got Reynolds in goal, Bayliss, Ben Jackson, Dobson, Batanwi. We've got Galbraith in the middle with Bowden, Cockrell, Aubrey, Benjamin and Paul Williams up top. So as I said, we do have a good youth academy and those are some of the stars that are looking to break through for season 3. Looking at the other version of the assistant report then, so you can see that this lines up with Moore, Gomez, Gibson, Watts and Ashcroft, Hamer, Randall, Leandrinho, Agner, John Patrick and Talage. So looking at that in terms of season 3, we do need to improve in quite a few places. Simon Moore's contract is going to be running out. I'm not going to renew it because of the amount that he earns. I think we can get a better goalkeeper who is of a similar talent level to what he is. Left back I think he's sorted. Centre backs look good. Ashcroft maybe is a little bit vulnerable at right back. We might go out and try and break the market and see if we can get a better right back. In terms of the middle, Hamer is definitely a lock as our best player. Randall, not 100% sure that he's going to be of the standard to get us to that next level. Leandrinho's fine, John Patrick's fine, Agner's fine, and as I said, Talage scoring goals for fun at the top of the pitch. So we probably need another striker, maybe another couple of wingers, because if we have either of those two go down, it kind of is a step down in quality. So those are the positions we're going to look for. It's definitely going to be a right back, definitely going to be a couple of wingers, maybe a midfielder and a striker, just to complement Talaj at the top of the pitch. Looking at some of the strengths and weaknesses of the team, just picking a few out. Lack of eccentricity again amongst the goalkeepers is not a bad thing, I don't think. Youth prospects, a number of talented players now coming through. Stephen Maitland, Peter Andrade and Elliot Benjamin. Lewis Gibson's been in fantastic form. Jonathan Gomez is the best of 4 good options able to play at right back, even though he's lining up at left back on that screen. Gibson is one of 8 good options at centre back. We now have midfield depth with Ethan Galbraith, one of the best of 7 good options able to play in defensive midfield. Looking at the weaknesses, balance, rushing out tendency for goalkeepers, goalkeeper depth, as I said, Moore's going to move on, so we're going to buy a few goalkeepers to try and plug that gap. Stamina, strength, reflexes, so things to really work on in training. So that brings us to the end of Season 2. The date is the 2nd of June 2024, which means that in the next episode, we're going to push on into Season 3 and continue the rebuild. Before we show you how we have got on though, as always, we're going to look at some transfers first. We're going to start off with the players on the right hand side of the screen that have left the club. There are quite a few players that we just let go of, and there are other players that have gone out across the season in terms of loan deals. So the first 3 players that left were free transfers. Tom Costello went to Cray, Ben Sheaf going to Blackpool, and Matt Godden going to Huddersfield. We had Riley Siddell go to Grimsby on loan. For the first major out of the series, Lewis Gibson has left the club to go to Stoke for £10.5 million. Now, if you think about that, this is one of those deals that we were talking about in the previous season when we were signing the free players that we were getting. There was always the option to sell them on if it didn't work out. Now, obviously, you could see that Gibson had a 7.11 average rating for ourselves, so it was working out. But it also meant that when a £10.5 million transfer fee comes in, with the board the way it is and the money and the finances and everything going on with takeovers, they were quick to snap that up and take the £10 million. Now, we had a whole raft of players going out on loan. Some players going out twice because of poor loan deals. We couldn't get them the right terms in terms of playing. So players like Marco Roos went out twice, I think, last season. Yeah, he went to Accrington and he also went to Fleetwood. So trying to find the best deals to develop the players that we have at the club. Also, some young players that have come through, the likes of Stephen Maitland, who now seems to be one of our own best prospects, came through one of our recent youth intakes. We sent him out on loan to Notts County to get a bit of playing time. He also ended up coming back and playing in the first team. I will give that away. The other players that we let go on permanent deals was Kasim Alaigbe, another one who we bought in on a free transfer and sold for £525,000. So again, making money using those free deals. Greg Ollie ended up going to Shrewsbury for £37,000. Casey Palmer left the club to go to Gillingham for £24,000, and 3 more loan deals at the bottom there to get some game time. Will Armitage, Jackson Conway and Bradley Stretton. So with all those players either going out on loan or being sold, it meant that we went and signed another load of players. So you can see some of them have been signed and moved on already. First player we bought in was Leighton Clarkson. You can see he's in a Blackburn shirt there, but he's a previous Liverpool Youth Academy produce. Came through their academy. He played for Blackburn, Aberdeen, and then has come on to play for us. A player who is 23 years old. I think he has a good future at the club. He can settle into a couple of positions, can play as an attacking or a central midfielder or a defensive midfielder, so a bit of versatility about him. He's a player that I really like, and I think we're going to try and stick around even if we do get promoted. We then signed Kasim Alaigbe, as I said, on a free transfer before we moved him on. We had Harrison Ashby come into the club from West Ham, a right back who can cover as a centre back, 23 years old, Scottish, with £150,000, played previously for Luton and West Ham. We then started to spend some money, and the first investment that we made after the takeover was complete was Kevin Zeffy. He is a winger who is Irish. We bought him from Inter Milan He's 20 years old, valued at 15.5 to 18 million pounds, and this is a player that I believe has featured on some Wonder Kid lists, and we were really lucky to get him. He was available for, I think it was £2.5 million. We swooped in and picked him up because we knew exactly what he was capable of, and I think we have a sound winger going forwards if we make it to the Premier League. We signed Luke Plange for 525,000, plays as a striker but can also cover left and right side. Has been around a little bit, Derby, Crystal Palace, Oxford, even went out and played some club football in Belgium. I think a 22-year-old with that kind of experience is valuable to any team. We signed Henrique from Fluminense for 350,000, another central player who can play in the middle of the park. He can play as an attacking and defensive midfielder too. We did send him out on loan to Lincoln to get some first team experience, but he is one that I think will develop into a bit of a star. Only 19 years old, valued at 4.3 to 7 million pounds. We signed Martin Ortega. He is a right back who can move anywhere up the right hand side of the pitch. He's 25 years old. He's an Argentinian player. He's started off his career at Quilmes, went to Tigre, and then he's now with us. I think he's one who will do a job in the short term, but if we get promoted, I think he's one that we will look to replace quite quickly. We signed Cole McKinnon, former Rangers player who can play in a number of positions, a right back, play anywhere through the middle of the park, also in terms of being a midfielder. We also signed Santiago Hidalgo. He is a 20-year-old Argentinian striker, valued at 1.7 to 6 million pounds. Looking at him, you can see exactly why we wanted him. His pace and acceleration could be better, but in terms of the physical game in the Championship, he has decent strength of 11. He has 15 finishing, 13 dribbling. He has good first touch. The work rate and the vision are there. I think this one could be a bit of a bargain, and if it doesn't work out at 20, we can always sell him on and make that money back. He was 2.9 million pounds. We signed former Manchester United player Teden Mengi. He has been around the block quite a bit. Started at Man United, Derby, Birmingham, Cardiff, Blackpool, and finally ending up with us. 23 years old, valued at 2.9 to 5 million pounds. I think he was settling well in the first team. He has played quite a few games for us. He's 6 foot tall. He has good strength, good pace, good acceleration, decent tackling, and one that I think that, again, if it doesn't work out, we can always try and move him on. We signed Thomas Jacob. He's another Argentinian who plays at right back. Again, good competition for places there. Played for Newell's Old Boys in Argentina. We brought him into the first team to have competition at right back. We also have Coney de Winter. This is when you know that we are starting to have a real big push. Former Juventus player who has played at Westerlo, Empoli and Juventus. He stands at 6'3", a tall commanding centre-back, probably the best centre-back that we have at the club now, and given his pedigree, playing either as a centre-back or a defensive midfielder, it was a no-brainer to pick him up on a free transfer. In fact, it wasn't, sorry, it was a £475,000 transfer. We also signed Marco de Graca, who is another former Juventus player, plays as a striker mainly, but can be an attacking midfielder too. 23 years old, valued at 2.6 to 3.6 million pounds. He's a player that I think if we do step up might not make the grade, but it's always good to have a player who can just be rotated in if we need them. And then finally, we signed Finn Azaz, formerly of Aston Villa, Plymouth, Newport and Cheltenham. He's a solid midfielder who can play as an attacking midfielder or a central midfielder. 24 years old, Irish player, 1 international cap. And as I said, he's a versatile player who we like in those positions. And the final signing was Nathan Ferguson. He is a defender right or left, can also be a centre-back, formerly of West Brom, Crystal Palace. We bought him in on a free transfer, age of 24, now valued at 1.4 to 2.3 million pounds. So that's how we have tried to build the squad out. As you can see, goal scorers, quick wingers, and cover in those wing back areas are where we needed, and we have real quality now in Mengi and Winter in the centre back position. So we spent 7.75 million and only well, we had players sold to the value of 11.25 million to recoup some money. So once again, we are spending less than we are making, and that makes the board happy. Speaking of the board and the finances, let's check in with them. You can see that all of a sudden our new owners have gone a bit crazy. We have £1.7 million in the overall balance, but £35.1 million in terms of the transfer budget. There is a reason for it, and we will show you very, very shortly. The wage budget stands at 571,000. We are spending 397 with committed of 382,000. I can reveal the reason that the board have gone trigger happy when it comes to the amount of money that we can spend, and it's all because we have won the Sky Bet Championship. Now, the aim at the start of the season was to just get in and around the playoffs. Even if we had to do it the back door way, I was prepared to just climb the table and maybe not get promoted this season, even though we really wanted it. No, the team that we have built has managed to fly through the championship this time around. We have finished on 96 points, finishing 12 points clear of Burnley, and we have won the Sky Bet Championship. We'll break that down in just a second. In terms of the FA Cup, we were knocked out in the 4th round by Wolves, and we were knocked out in the 2nd round by Sunderland in the Carabao Cup. Once it became apparent that we were doing really well in the league, everything else just took a sidestep as we focused all our efforts on getting ourselves into the Premier League. So let's break down the stages and show you what has happened. If we go to the league table, you can see we have finished as champions, playing 46 games, winning 29, drawing 9, we lost 8, we scored 96, we conceded 53, we had a 43 goal difference, and we finished on 96 points, finishing 12 clear of Burnley, Ipswich, and 13 clear of Sheffield United. So a fantastic effort from all the players to get us not only where we wanted to be in terms of in and around the playoffs, but above that and exceed expectation by winning the Sky Bet Championship. If we look, let's have a little look in terms of goals. Where was our top goal scorer? So Laurent Tallage got 19 goals in the league. He was our top scorer. Dominic Solanke leading the way overall with 25. John Patrick was our best average rater with 7.22. In terms of assists, you got Shola Shortire for Nottingham Forest getting 19. But we had John Patrick with 10, Gustavo Hamer with 9, and Ethan Galbraith with 8. Leandrinho also popping up there with 8. If we go into Player of the Match Awards, our highest amount for Man of the Match Awards was Leandrinho with 4 and Kevin Zeffy with 4. Let's have a look in terms of clean sheets. How did we get on there? So Harry Lewis, he had 10 clean sheets overall across the season. Kanaya Boyce Clark for Reading led the way with 15. Yellow cards, Gustavo Hamer. Gustavo Hamer actually has a little bit of an anger issue in this game. He likes to get himself sent off. He got a red card in this season. He got 22 yellows. We also had Brody Hughes getting 14 and 1 red card. Shane Flynn getting 14 yellows. Jonathan Gomez also got 11 yellow cards. In terms of distance covered per 90 minutes, we had a hard-working team with Alex Robertson finishing 3rd with 15.48 km covered per 90 minutes, and Tyrrell Ashcroft with 14.78. In the tackles per 90 minutes section, nobody apart from Leandrinho right down here in 19th place with 3.04 getting on that list. And in the dribbles per 90 minutes, you can see our highest player was 17th with Shane Flynn with 4.11 per 90 minutes. So an absolutely fantastic season in terms of the competitions. Could not have asked for anything better from the players. And going up as champions of the Sky Bet Championship means that we are going to be playing Premier League football next season. Looking at the club vision page then, our job security is now secure, and you can see that in terms of the board vision, the actionable objectives work within the wage budget is on course. Maximum of 1-year contracts for players over the age of 34, they're not judging. 2-year contracts for over the age of 32. Next season, they want us to attempt to avoid relegation from the Premier League. Now, of course, that is going to be majorly difficult with the squad that we have. Some of that transfer funds are going to get put across into the wage funds because we're going to have to try and attract a calibre of player above the ones that we've got. The players that we have are already kind of revolting against me a little bit because I won't give them bigger contracts yet. I want to see what is going to happen in the summer first before committing to bigger contracts for first team players, especially if some of them aren't going to even be at the club. I don't want to just go and land them with a massive deal that's going to get us in trouble further down the line. And finally, they want us to grow the club's reputation. Looking at the board feedback, a B+ from the board. To summarise, the board are very pleased with your overall leadership of the team. Last season's successes remain fresh in our memories, and our appraisal of your current performance takes that into account. So they want us to continue to develop players using the club's youth system. We have a good few young talents coming through, certainly from those first two crops of youth intake. Maitland and Williams, I think it is, are two players that are in and around the first team now. We'll have a little look at that in a minute. Play possession football, reserving judgment. Play entertaining football, reserving judgment. Play high tempo pressing football. Notable highlights: pleased with the 2-1 win against West Brom. Fairly pleased with the quality of the pressing using this style, and they are pleased with the highly impressive 3-0 victory against Huddersfield. They are concerned at my lack of support, and that, as I said, is due to the fact that the players all want new contracts now we have got promoted. Looking at the supporters, we get a B+ there too. They want us to play possession football, play entertaining football, play high tempo pressing football, be competitive against Aston Villa and against Leicester, and they are pleased with the 2-1 championship victory over West Brom, delighted with Leandrinho's recent performances, pleased with Agner's recent performances, but they're disappointed with Alex Robertson, Jonathan Gomez and Luke Plange's recent performance. Going to have a quick run through the squad and show you some outstanding performers from the previous season. If we run down the list, you can see Kelland Watts has been immense in our defence. He has played 42 games across the season, getting a 7.12 average rating. Player who's now really settling in at the age of 25. His value is up to 14 to 15 million pounds. So he's currently unhappy, but that is down to the fact that he wants a new contract and the players have decided to ask to leave rather than just understand that I want to wait until the end of the season. We have Jonathan Gomez, who is an American international, another one who wants a contract. He's up to 9.2 to 10.5 million pounds. He's a player that I think will carry over into the Premier League quite well, although he might drop down to just being a rotation option. We had players like Ted Nmengi who come in and he got himself a decent rating quite quickly. 6.89 across 8 games. He also played in World Cup CAF qualifying section, so off playing away for Angola, but settling himself into the team pretty well. Other big players across the season, we had Shane Flynn, who stepped in and played 39 games from left back, getting himself a 7.01 average rating, so pretty decent. 23 years old now, Irish player. If we further down the list, we can pick out Brodie Hughes, another player who can play at left back or right back, former Chelsea player who has stepped up and has started to develop. You can see here in terms of his potential ability, now 20 years old, 6.2 to 8.2 million pounds. Further down the list, we have Ethan Galbraith, another one stepping forward and really making that step up in terms of his football development. 24 years old now, valued at 8.2 to 9.2 million pounds. He played 23 games as a starter in a 7.03 average rating, and he now has 8 goals in 62 appearances for the club. And another one that is definitely going to carry forwards into the Premier League, but I'm not too sure whether he will be a starter or not. And then at the bottom, Laurent Talage. This is probably my biggest headache. He has done absolutely nothing wrong. Has been in the Premier League before with Brighton. I'm not 100% sure he is Premier League quality, but the development is there at the age of 23. He's now 18.5 to 21 million pounds. He has scored a lot of goals across the season. 23 and 40 is a decent return. Not too sure of his quality in the Premier League, but I think he deserves the benefit of the doubt at the start of the season at least. Further down, you've got Kevin Zeffi, investment from Inter Milan, who is developing wonderfully as a footballer. His potential ability shows that he's going to be a big star at the club. He's valued at 15.5 to 18 million pounds at the age of 20. Stats have started to develop in terms of anticipation, leadership, but again, it's pace, acceleration, dribbling, first touch, finishing. There's all stats there that can still develop at the age of 20. Played 36 games and scored 11 goals across the season. You've got John Patrick on the other side of the pitch. He's a player who is now 21, 1.6 to 3.1 million pounds. Obviously doesn't have as much talent as what Zeffi does, but when you look at his contribution to the team, he scored 12 goals in 60 games. He's picked up a few injuries across the couple of seasons he's been at the club, which has probably held him back a little bit. We also have Keon Edwards, who's took a massive step in his development in terms of game time. He's now played 31 times for the club, scoring 9 goals. Came up big with some real good goals across the season. He scored 11 goals in 13 starts with another 23 from the bench. And then we do have a few players in there that I'm not too sure what to do with. Players like Alex Robertson, are they going to be able to make the step to the Premier League? I'm not 100% sure. We have also got players like Julimar who have come in. Again, don't know if he's going to break through at the top of the pitch. Who else do we have? Fabio Tavares. Not too sure he's going to make it. Players like Isaac Price, who we picked up, they might have to be moved on. We have also got some players that have gone out on loan. We also show you Stephen Maitland. He's one of our biggest prospects who have broken through from our own youth academy. We did send him out on loan to Notts County. He wasn't happy with the deal, so we bought him back. Valued at 5.8 to 7 million pounds. And for a midfielder, he's actually scored 4 times in 8 starts for the first team, so that is pretty decent. Then down here at the bottom we have Paul Williams. He has just broken into the first team at the end of the season, played a couple of games, yet to score a first team goal. But you can see he's played at the FIFA Under-20 World Cup and the European Under-19 Championship qualifying, so he has a big future, and his potential ability matches that of some of the regular first teamers that are at the club. So that's what we look like in terms of the squad and what's happened for those players across the season. In terms of the squad planners and the best 11s then, in fact, I'm going to go to assistant report first and show you what he thinks. So we've got Lewis in goal, Flynn, Watts, De Winter and Gomez as a back four, Hamer, Galbraith and Azaz, then Zeffi, John Patrick and Talage. So it's easy to just pull the trigger and start saying, oh, I want to go out and buy a load of players for the Premier League, because that is the truth. But I think some of these players do deserve a chance. Lewis in goal has done nothing wrong, but he was only a good Championship goalkeeper anyway, so we're going to need a goalkeeper. Flynn, I think, is still improving at left-back. Watts is still improving as a centre-back. Coney De Winter obviously has the experience we need for the Premier League. Gomez as a right-back, I think, could still improve, and he's an American international. Then we've got Hamer, who now might find the step up to the Premier League a little bit tough. Hopefully, he will take it in his stride and just go with it. We've got Azaz, who we signed on free transfer, and Galbraith in the middle. I think we're going to need at least one player who is an upgrade on both of them. Zeffi on the left-hand side is a fantastic player who is still developing. John Patrick on the right-hand side is good. Don't know whether he's going to make the step up to the Premier League. And we got Laurent Talage up top, scoring goals for fun in the Championship, but again there's question marks about how good he is and how good he can be. Looking at some of the players that we've got in terms of the players coming through, so Reynolds is a goalkeeper that I'm not too familiar with. I think we just took him on the new intake that came in. Players like Brodie Hughes, Dobson's been out on loan, Elaine and Bayliss, Enrique's out on loan getting first team experience, Agner, Quaji, Winlock, Isaac Moore and Andrade has been out on loan getting some experience too. So that is pretty much season 3 wrapped up. It's been a successful season, and now we have the excitement of Premier League football to come. There's going to be another big overhaul in the summer. Now we have that massive transfer kitty. I'm not too sure if it's wise to go out and spend it all. We're going to have to do a bit more wheeler dealing, I think, to try and get some players who maybe just contribute to the wage budget and not the transfer budget if we transfer some of that across. However it happens, we are going to have to go out and once again rebuild the team and keep reinventing the team going into the Premier League season. If we have any chance of survival, we're going to have to go again, and certainly going to go and spend some of that money. In preparation for our first season back in the Premier League since 2001, we were heavily involved in the transfer market. Now, I was willing to give some of my championship winning team a chance in the Premier League, but there were 1 or 2 players that we needed to move on, and also there were some upgrades that we needed in certain positions. So we set about going to work, and the first part of the transfer window, the first player that we allowed to leave the club was Jonathan Gomez. He's left back, right back. He was playing as either. Ended up moving to Bournemouth. We cashed in our chips. He was the young American that we bought early on. Sold him to Bournemouth for 8.75 million, so not a bad return on the money there. We then sold Jay McGrath. Allowed him to go to Salford. He was only a fringe player anyway who wasn't going to make the grade. And then Harrison Ashby, the former West Ham player that we bought in. Again, another one not really going to make the grade, so we took the cash there. In the first part of the transfer window where we could sign players, the first player that we signed was Ben Woodburn. Now, obviously not the big standout star that you would think that you should go and try and buy, but the way I wanted to do this was try and work within the wage budget. I don't want to start all of a sudden signing players, put them on 50 grand a week and trying to run the club into the ground somewhat. It would have been difficult if we would have just spent all the transfer money on 1 or 2 players when we really needed a squad. So knowing he had a big club or 2 experience in the past, he's at Preston in the game. But considering the money that we paid, I think it could turn out to be a bit of a bargain. £1.4 million we paid for him at the time. Obviously, what happens in the future is something different. But the next player we signed was a big one for the club. It is Rooney Bargy. Now, just as I was saying, I don't really want to go out and spend loads of money on players and buy the wrong type of players. This is very much a player that I was willing to invest £10 million in. Obviously, £42,500 is wages, but it will be an absolute bargain in the future because he's an absolute worldie of a wonder kid, and I was actually surprised that he wanted to come to Coventry. Next up, we improved our goalkeeping ranks. Christian Joel Sanchez, he came to the club. Obviously, in the Championship, you could get away with a goalkeeper that maybe isn't of the greatest standard as long as you've got a good defence. We needed an upgrade at goalkeeper, so that was the first player that we bought in the position. We then went and signed Ezequiel Fernandez. He is a 23-year-old Argentinian, can play through the middle. Obviously, you can see the exact reasons why we signed him. Great passing, determination, good pace, good acceleration. Player who can get up and down the pitch and will be box to boxing. We signed Hugo Di Matteo. He is a player who has come to us to be a second striker, basically, a bit of a rotation option, a cheaper option. 21 years old, £6,500 investment in terms of the wages. I think he has the ability to go on and become a good player. We then went back to Brazil. We signed Kawa Elias. He's currently out on loan at Leyton Orient. Very much one for the future. A left winger who can cut in and also play as a makeshift striker. You can see here his progression across the season isn't very good, but I presume some of that is to do with the fact he's away from the club, and overall he should get better as the game goes on. We then, as cover at left back, went and signed Yuta Nakayama. A cheap option, really. Didn't want somebody who was going to put in massive wage demands, but you could see already he isn't going to make the cut, so when we flip the page, you might see that name once again. We signed Max Lowe as a left back, again, a player who fits the bill. £10,750 in terms of the wages isn't going to bust the bank. He has decent attributes for a left-sided defender, which is exactly what you want. 29 years old, has played for Sheffield United, so we know he's experienced enough. We then went back to Brazil, to Cruzeiro, and we signed Zé Ivaldo. He is a 29-year-old defender. He is tall, he is quick, he is physical. He's everything that you need in a Premier League defender, and I think we might have got a bit of a bargain in him. 29 years old, he probably won't get any better, but he certainly will be of the standard that we need to get us started in the Premier League. And then we went back to Brazil once more. He didn't stay the course. Obviously, you could see already that we brought him in and he has moved on. But we did sign Calabe. He is a central midfielder who can play in a variety of roles. We signed him on a scouting report and he basically became unhappy as soon as he walked through the doors at the club. So on to the second part of the transfer window then, and we continued to sell players. We let Jamie Bowden leave to go to Parma on a free. Adam Randall left to go to Reading on a free. Michael Rosiak went to Racco for 300,000. Johan Puig didn't really make the cut, went to Albacete for 425,000. Josh Reed went to Queen's Park for 150,000. Fabio Tavares, who we had high hopes for at the start of the game, didn't make the cut as the players were coming in and the standard was getting better. He just didn't make the cut. 195,000 to Wigan. Josh Nichols went out on loan to Northampton. Lee Harkin went to Morecambe. Riley Siddle went to Accrington. Elliot Benjamin went to Barrow on loan. Blaine Rowe to Eastleigh. And then we had a hell of a lot of loans. Let's just rattle through these. Johnny Emerson, James Bayliss, Harrison Dudziak, Isaac Abdul-Razak, Cole McKinnon, Samuel Dobson, Luke Plange. Julimar ended up going out on loan. He did become disillusioned at the club quite quickly once it became apparent he wasn't going to be a first teamer anymore. Kamani Ryan, Jack Hinchy, Leandrinho was the next big departure. He left to go to Astana. We picked up a fair amount of money for him. Didn't really want to let him go. I did think that he had a future at the club, but as soon as you see some of the players that we signed, you can see the reasons why he was kind of edged out the team and maybe felt like his time at the club was coming to an end. We let Alex Robertson go to Familiaco for 165,000. Corness, Kem Campbell, Lee Jones, Luke McCormack, Matty Longstaff, and then Kao Elias, who's just come in, joining Marco Russ out on loan. Various different clubs there. Sunderland, Bolton, Carlisle. Finazaz ended up leaving the club to go on a free to Chesterfield. Bit of a strange one. He had a bit of a fit that he wasn't a first teamer anymore, despite the fact that we have signed quite a few decent players. Couldn't understand that we wanted him to be a squad rotation option. Instead, he decided to ask for a move. He got his big move to Chesterfield. Leighton Clarkson went on loan to Huddersfield. Reece Russell Denny went on loan to Bristol Rovers. Ishmael Kabaya went on loan to Accrington. Peter Andrade, who is going to be a big star if he continues his rise. Let's just show you him pretty quickly. May not seem that he's all that, but as a 19-year-old regen who's valued at 19 to 27 million pounds, there is obviously something there. As I said then, Calabi went to FC Copenhagen for 6.25 million. Adam Berry went to Bristol Rovers on loan. Lewis Orford ended up going to Millwall for £700,000. Wasn't going to make the cut. And Harrison McMahon went to Swindon on loan. So that's all the players that have departed. Obviously, I was saying that we need to build the squad up and we've let a lot of players go. But we were active in the second part of the transfer market ourselves. The first player is not a stat. The first player is Jung Sang Bin. He is a striker who comes with quite a big reputation. Obviously, Korean national, has played for Grasshoppers, Middlesbrough, Wolverhampton Wanderers he was at, and we managed to go and pick him up for quite cheap. How much did we pay for him? Free. A free transfer signing from Wolves, and that is a bargain in my eyes. 24 years old. Has everything that we're going to need for the Premier League, I think. 13 finishing, 15 pace, 16 acceleration. I think this is a bargain for a free transfer. We then signed Tommy Doyle on a free transfer also. Comes to us from Sheffield United. Has been around the block a little bit. Played for Hamburg, Cardiff, Manchester City before joining us. He's estimated to cost 20 to 25 million pounds. So I was actually surprised that he came to us on a free transfer. Maybe he's one to keep. Maybe he's one to move on. We'll find out as the season goes. We went and signed Alan Franco. He's a 27-year-old Ecuadorian who plays in the middle of the park, and another one with great passing, off the ball, vision, work rate, teamwork, agility, stamina, pace and acceleration all there. And I think, again, one with a checkered career path. Atletico Mineiro, Charlotte FC, Talleres in Argentina, Atletico Mineiro, and then finally landing in England to play for good old Coventry. The next player up was James Garner, another free transfer, and this one is a bit of a bargain. Obviously, he's a player that was playing for Manchester United, has then moved to Everton. In the game, didn't really make the cut at Everton, and that's how we ended up picking him up on a free transfer. I think he's one that is going to raise the standards of our midfielders all throughout the game. We then signed Felix Ballas, the first of the regens. Yes, we are at that stage now where we are picking up 19-year-old regens who have come from Ipswich. The next player, Rodrigo Cesar, went back to Brazil. This kid looks like he's about 12, but he's actually 19. He has everything, I think, that we're going to need for a future star. He is quick with 13 pace, 13 acceleration, dribbling of 12, first touch of 12, heading of 15, which is strange for a player of 5'7". His jumping reach is 7, obviously not matching his heading, but technique is good. He has good determination at 15, decisions of 14. I think he's going to be a bit of a bargain player, and if it doesn't work out for us at Coventry, then maybe we could move him on for a lot more money than we paid for him. 1.6 million was the deal to get him over the line. The next player is Lorenzo Riccio. You might sense a theme coming here. We are signing young, fresh talent that are looking to either progress with the club or we are going to move them on for big money down the line. Obviously, we're going to try and limit this to 5 seasons. Don't know if we're going to stick with it for maybe a 6th one. I am very, very tempted because this save really is just a challenge in itself to constantly have to regenerate the team and argue with the board, the takeovers and everything. It's really an enjoyable save, so might stretch it out a bit and you might see that kid down the line. And the final player to come in this season is Juan Cáceres. He is a right back. He is from Paraguay, I think that is. Yes, from Paraguay, 26 years old, and he's just basically going to be a player that is a right-sided player, can bomb up and down the pitch. Pace of 11 and acceleration of 12 maybe aren't going to cut it in the Premier League long term, but certainly in the short term, I think he has the experience to be a great Premier League player. So looking overall then, certainly in that second part of the season, we only spent £9 million there. We recouped 14.75. So after the outlay on players and the turnaround in playing staff, it seems it was all worth it, with our first season back in the Premier League since 2001, resulting in an 11th place finish. We played 38 games and finished on 48 points. We will break the Premier League season down in a minute. But looking across the other competitions, disappointingly, we were knocked out in the 3rd round of the FA Cup by Birmingham City. We were knocked out in the 2nd round of the Carabao Cup by Sheffield United. So we did finish in 11th place, 48 points, 64 was what we needed to get into the European places, but that sounds crazy. The most important thing was how far away we were from the relegation zone, and you can see that we actually finished 16 points clear of Leicester, who got relegated. But before we look at our Premier League campaign in just a bit more detail, we have a few other things to get through first. The first of which is going to be the finances. So you can see that at this point, the club now has a balance of £56.8 million in the bank. And they are willing to let us spend for season 5, £39.4 million. We have a wage budget of £945,000 and we are spending £852,000. So that means going into season 5, we're going to be able to invest in the playing squad and hopefully improve on that 11th place finish. Looking at the club vision page then, our job security is secure. You can see our actionable objectives are to work within the wage budget. We are on course for that, obviously, just showing you we have quite a lot of capital for wages. In terms of the 5-year plan, next season they want to attempt to avoid relegation from the Premier League, and our contract is up for renewal. So it obviously depends on us becoming a fully fledged Premier League team across many seasons rather than just having one season back in the league as to whether that contract gets renewed. So hopefully we're going to invest heavily in the playing staff and make that a reality. Looking at the board then, the board feedback from Liam McMahon, who is our chairperson, it says, to summarise, the board are very pleased with your overall leadership of the team. Last season's successes remain fresh in our memories and our appraisal of your current performance takes that into account. So the board culture now, they want to play possession football, play entertaining football and play high tempo pressing football. So they are pleased with both the entertaining and the high tempo, and they're satisfied with us playing possession possession football. Not too sure how we do that in the Premier League, where we are pretty much a passive team and have to rely on counter-attacking most of the time, but hey-ho, we're going to try and hit that as we go into Season 5 and are developing the playing staff. Notable highlights from the board: pleased with the 2-2 draw against Tottenham, pleased with the positive atmosphere in the changing room. They are fairly happy with the number of goals we have scored of late. They were disappointed about a 7-0 defeat against Man City. Yes, that is the reality of being back in the Premier League. And they were disappointed about losing 3-1 to Brighton. If we go to the supporters, let's have a little look at that. They give us a B as well. Overall, the supporters are pleased with the job we are doing. They too want us to play possession football, play entertaining football, and play high-tempo pressing football. And matching the board, they are happy with the entertaining football and high-tempo football, and they want us to... or they're just satisfied with playing possession football. The supporter expectations for the upcoming season: they want us to attempt to avoid relegation from the Premier League. Notable highlights for them: 2-2 draw with Tottenham, 2-2 draw with Leicester. Fairly happy with the number of goals we've scored. Very disappointed about that 7-0 defeat against Man City. Disappointed with Gustavo Hamer's performances recently, and very disappointed with Alan Franco's recent performances too. Let's go back then and break down that memorable first season back in the Premier League in a bit more detail. If we go into the stages and have a little look at how we have got on. So we finished in 11th place, which is very respectable, almost smack bang in the middle of the table. Played 38 games. We had 13 wins, most notably home and away against Bristol City, home and away against Wolves, beat West Ham, Everton, Aston Villa, Fulham to go with it. We had 9 draws, notably drawing with both Tottenham home and away and Leeds home and away. We did get a draw with Manchester City 2-2, but obviously when we move across to the next column, you can see that the away game, when we went to Manchester City, we got spanked 7-0. We lost to Liverpool 5-1, and losing 16 games is probably not the best. Across the season, we scored 56 goals. We did concede 70. We had a goal difference of -14, which obviously shows that the defence and the goalkeeper might need upgrading. It's one of those things where also when you're playing against teams that include Erling Haaland, Mohamed Salah and Darwin Núñez, you're going to have problems defensively. We did get 48 points though. That was only a point behind Wolves above us. We finished 5 points behind Aston Villa. Finished quite a way off of the European places, but as I said earlier on, to even think we were that close to Europe is crazy, considering that the board thought we would be in and around here. I mean, Bristol City only getting 15 points, Burnley only getting 18 points, and Leicester did put up a good fight, getting 32. If we go back to the profile page then, let's hit the goals tab and see, did we have anybody who was on that page? So Laurent Tallage was our top scorer across the season in the Premier League. He managed to get himself 13 goals. In the average ratings, our top player isn't even in the top 20. If we go to assists, where are our goals coming from? Ezekiel Fernandez in the middle of the pitch with 8 assists was our top assister. If we go to player of the match awards, Erling Haaland dominating that category, leading the way. We didn't have anybody there. Clean sheets, don't think our goalkeeper would have kept many. Christian Joel Sanchez keeping 5 clean sheets. Yellow cards, this was a bit of a problem for us with Gustavo Hamer and Zé Ivaldo both getting 15 yellow cards each. Discipline, obviously a thing in the Premier League that we are struggling with. Distance covered per 90 minutes, we don't have a player there. Tackles per 90 minutes, we don't have a player there. And dribbles per 90 minutes, we don't have a player there either. So, pretty impressive for a first season back in the Premier League. It's a building block, something that we are surely going to be able to build upon. We do have that transfer kitty to go out and spend some money. So hopefully next season we are going to be stepping up the table and looking up rather than down. To finish off Season 4 then, we're going to look to the future and show you where the squad is at the end of Season 4 and how we can improve going into Season 5. 2 versions of the best 11 as always. The first one is the one that shows us our strengths and our weaknesses, but let's focus on the team first. So we have Sanchez in goal, Flynn at left back, Zé Ivaldo, Watts and Caceres as a right back. We have Hamer, Garner and Doyle as our midfielders. Kevin Zeffy on the left, Bargy on the right and Tolage up top. So we do have quite a big transfer kitty going into Season 5. On paper, this is a really good squad. However, we are going to need to upgrade again, I think. Zayvaldo struggling with the Premier League in terms of his discipline. Caceres likewise. Sanchez, I'm not convinced about as a goalkeeper. Might have to upgrade him. Hamer has come along for the ride and he's proven himself at Premier League level. Garner and Doyle forming a partnership in the middle. I think there is an upgrade to be had there. Zeffy on the left is sound. He's kind of a quiet wonder kid, and Rooney Bargy obviously is a wonder kid. Talage is scoring goals up top, but I do think we need a little bit of extra punch, so it might be that we go out and buy another striker. Looking at some of our strengths: punching tendency for the goalkeeper, wage budget, youth prospects, defence depth, defence in general. It says Kellen Watts is very good at centre back. He's also good at left back. Gustavo Hamer is a good option in the defensive midfield position. Weaknesses though: strength, positioning, bravery, one-on-ones, off the ball, handling for goalkeepers, work rate, pace. So a few areas that we might be able to have a look at in terms of upgrades with that money. If we look at the best 11 in terms of Matt Wells, who is our assistant manager, we now have Sanchez as the goalkeeper, Lowe at left back, De Winter, Watts and Ortega. We have Hamer, Fernandez and Doyle, Zeffy, Bargy and Laurent Talage up top. In terms of the youngsters coming through, we have Reynolds, Bayliss, Alistair, Dobson, Brody Hughes on the right, Riccio, Quashie, Maitland, Winlock, Isaac Moore and Andrade, who I showed you when we were loaning him out in the middle of the park. The other player to show you who's progressing very nicely is Stephen Maitland. He has made first team appearances at the club already and he's developing his game nicely. So overall, it's been a fantastic season, the first one back in the Premier League since 2001. I think in terms of the future, we're going to have to upgrade in certain areas again if we're going to progress up the table. Not too sure the type of player that I'm actually going to look for, if I'm too honest, but it's one of them where I suppose now we are just looking for quality over quantity, and maybe a complete overhaul is out of the question, and we're just going to start to add that little bit of quality to the team as we need it. Once again, we're going to kick things off with the transfers, the new faces that have come into the club and the faces that have left the club. Now, obviously, second season back in the Premier League is a difficult one. We had a squad that was capable in the first season, but we really needed to kick on. There was a bigger wage budget and transfer budget for us to work with, and we had to try and improve the squad in most areas. So let's break down the transfer business that we did, starting with some of the players that left the club in the first phase of the transfer window. So we had Harrison Nee and Isaac Price leave the club on free transfers. We sold Ben Woodburn, a player that we bought in who was a bit more experienced than some of the players we had. Couldn't really break himself into the first team, so we have allowed him to move on. He went to Reading for a total of £2 million. The next player that left the club was Jackson Conway. He was an American that I really liked the look of at the start of the game, worked his way through Atlanta's youth teams, and then even switched his allegiance to Scotland later on in the game. He was a player that wasn't going to break into the team. We moved into the Premier League. He isn't of that standard, so we allowed him to move on. He went to Motherwell for £115,000. Sold Ethan Wardy, who was our cup goalkeeper. We allowed him to go to Blackpool for £28,000. Ted Mengi, another rock at the centre of our championship winning defence. Fortunately, he wasn't going to cut it in the Premier League, so we allowed him to move on too. He went to Rotherham for £600,000. The first of the big sales that we made was Ethan Galbraith, a player who had firmly established himself in that defensive midfielder role in the Championship, had to go in the Premiership, wasn't as effective. The money came in from Trabzonspor. We decided to take £5 million for him, and I think that was a pretty good deal for both him and the club. Talon Shepherd and Malachi Fagan-Walcott were the other two players to go out on loan in this section. And then we started the rebuild once again. So the first player that we bought in was Joe Gelhardt. Now, if you've been around Football Manager for the past couple of years, this is a name that crops up on the Wonder Kid lists. He is kind of breaking through at Leeds, getting himself a little bit of game time here and there. Not really established himself as a first teamer there yet. But for the money that we paid, 2.5 million rising to 2.6 million, this seemed like a gamble worth taking. We had one or two players at the club that weren't really going to cut it in the Premier League, and I thought with his youth. I mean, he's 25 now, so he should really be in that fully developed stage of his career. And if he's going to make it at a club, I thought we'd give him the chance at Coventry. The next player that we signed, now these are, the next couple of players are a blend of both youth players that we've poached from other clubs and kind of poaching from the next gen top 50. Don't really know if that's cheating, whether we should be using our scouts to find players, but if the next gen top 50 is there and available and you can see it freely, surely that's as good as being able to scout some players. But I'll explain that when we get to them. The first of the players we poached was a player from Liverpool, Lefteris Constantino, 19-year-old Cypriot defensive midfielder, one very much for the future. We signed Charlie Hadland. We poached him as well. We poached John Wall from Arsenal and then loaned him out. It says on loan from Coventry. Where do we loan him to? We loaned him somewhere. Adam Jenks is another player we picked up from Arsenal. Lucas Melinar was the first of the players that we poached from the next gen list. Now, obviously, you can see that the players themselves are really good prospects. He is a Slovakian. He has played 11 times for his national team. He's 19 years old. Featured on the next gen 50 Wonder Kids list, which kind of went and picked them up. I mean, for the money we paid, £900,000 from Slovan Bratislava, that could turn out to be an absolute bargain. The next one was Zarko Bogdanovic. He's another of these next gen 50 players that we just went and kind of poached. He, though, is turning into some player. He's a Serbian central defender, valued now at 26 to 38 million pounds. Did have to promise he would be a regular starter in the Premier League, and we put him on £23,000. But he's one that is really going to have an influence across the season, I think. The next player to come in was Eva Quiros Gardona. He's a Mexican, 19 years old. Again, 4 caps for his national team. Comes in looking fantastic. Pace, acceleration, dribbling, finishing, first touch. Maybe not the finished article at 19, but he's one that, again, he's going to get into the first team and going to have first team games. Neil Maupay was the next player that we signed. How much did we sign him for? Just quickly, 7.75 million for Neil Maupay. So again, another player who is Premier League experienced, one that could probably teach Joe Gelhardt if there's anything left to get out of Joe Gelhardt. I think Neil Maupay could probably help to extract it. Don't know whether Maupay is going to be that first teamer or whether Gelhardt will be, but whichever one is playing the more regular, I think they can push each other. We know Maupay scores goals in the Premier League, and hopefully it will be a gamble that pays off at 7.75 million. The next player in was another next-gen player, Leonardo Zaminga, 20 years old, valued now at 11.5 to 15 million pounds. We did have to pay a lot more, 4.5 million pounds for him, but I think he could turn into a bargain long term. Next player is Gianluca Gaetano. Who did we sign him from? Is it Cremonese? Yeah, Cremonese, even though he's in a Napoli shirt in the top corner, Parton Hope shirt in the top left-hand corner. Another player with big league experience. He comes in expecting to be a regular starter on £35,000 a week. He's a former Italian under-21 international player who is quick and dynamic, can play from both wings, can play in the midfield too. And the final player that we signed in this phase of the transfer window was Rio Hatate. He is a former Celtic midfielder who we managed to get on a free transfer. He'd been on a scouting list for a long time. Our scouts told us to just go and buy him. Luckily, we waited it out. Celtic didn't renew the contract. We have managed to pick him up. He had a big enough reputation to get a work permit. He's going to slot into our midfield and play some wonderful football, I'm sure. So, in the next part of the transfer window then, this is where a lot more activity ended up happening. There are a few players that have, you're going to see here, that have not yet been announced, that have already left the club, but we'll work through that as we get along to it. So the first big sale of this part is Max Alain. We sold him to Stoke for £2.4 million. There was a lot of free transfers, Matty Longstaff being one, got him off the wage bill, that was good. Jack Hinchy went to Aldershot, then a lot of loans for youth teamers. Players like Marco Russa still developing, Josh Nichols. Cole McKinnon left the club to go to Venezia, £105,000 recouped for him. One of the players I think we signed early on in the save. Then we had another load of loans where we were just basically sending out youth teamers to go and get experience. There are a few in here that are a bit dodgy, like Martin Ortega was a player that we signed for the first team. become unhappy when he couldn't become a first team regular, wanted massive wage demands. He's ending up now playing for QPR. Luke McCormack went out on loan, Thomas Jacob, Leighton Clarkson, Julio Cesar. If we come down the list, you can see that Peter Andrade is one that is worth giving a mention to. Another youth teamer that has been coming through the ranks. He had a spell on loan at Rotherham, scored 6 in 43. He's valued at 23 to 31 million pounds. We have been receiving bids from big clubs for him, so hopefully once we get him back on loan, when we go into season 6, which I can reveal is happening, hopefully he can be in and around the first team and having a bit of influence. Next player to leave was Juan Caceres, another right back who couldn't get into the team. I thought we were going to get a lot better out of him than what we did. Didn't really perform in the Premier League, so we have moved him on. Alan Franco was another one. Wanted extortionate money, and this is one of my bugbears about Football Manager. I absolutely love the game. I have no concerns about match engines and some of the things that some of the people out there were saying, oh, this FM23 isn't that great. I have no problem with all of that. The thing that needs fixing for me is the finances with the AI. So when you approach a club that is AI and you want to sign their player, all of a sudden that player wants £50,000 a week. And when you buy a player and you want to renew their contract, the AI will then say, oh, well, I'm a first teamer, I want 50 grand a week. And that's what happened here. Alan Franco wanted a new deal, he wanted to reflect his ability. We offered him a contract, he wanted 50 grand. I was no way I was going to pay it. So he then got unhappy, decided to leave the club, and when we sold him to Lorient, he takes £17,000 a week to go be a regular starter in France. Now that makes no sense to me because he was already on more than that. I think he was on about 32 grand at Coventry. Wanted 50, we wouldn't pay it because I wanted that extra 18,000 to give to another player, and off he goes to Lorient on a lot less money. Makes no sense to me, but I don't design the game. Obviously, it's something that is probably difficult to control, but the AI should probably reduce their expectations of what you're going to pay for a player if they don't have as high expectations of when... Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. He could have stayed at Coventry on more money and not kicked off and wanted to leave. Instead, he took a deal to go somewhere else for less money, but when we wanted to re-sign him, it's 50 grand. I don't get it, but hey-ho, we move on. The next player that you're going to not be introduced to, but he's already left the club, so let's introduce him first. So we signed Solly March. As you can see, we picked him up on a free transfer. Another of these players who's played in the Premier League, 32 years old, bit more experienced, kind of like a leader of the group. Came in, he was a squad player, was happy to take squad player, and then all of a sudden, halfway through the season, decided, oh, he doesn't want to be a squad player anymore. He wants to run off and go and play football somewhere else. So again, we took a deal for him, and we got him for nothing, sold him for 5.75 million. So if some of these deals don't work out, we are at least proving that we can get money in the bank. Next player to leave was Christian Joel Sanchez. Didn't like the fact he was replaced as a goalkeeper. He did have an injury, which was the reason that we had to replace him in the first place. So, kind of swings and roundabouts. Not too fussed about that one. Ismail Kabaya went out on loan. Laurent Talage has left the club. He went to Trabzonspor. This one actually did pull on the heartstrings because he was one of the players that we managed to sign early on in the rebuild. Had done really, really well for the club. Didn't want to let him go, but he kind of sensed that he wasn't going to be Premier League standard. And we were going out and buying players that are, and he just asked to leave. And we said, you've done fantastic for the club. That whole nugget in the manager-player interactions where it's like, for everything you've done, we won't stand in your way, and off he goes. Next player, Samuel Dobson. He's gone out on loan. We have Brody Hughes out on loan, Win Locke, Santiago Hidalgo. Harrison McMahon left. He went to Bristol City for £1.7 million. Another one we picked up for nothing at the start, so a good deal there. Tommy Doyle was another player that we have managed to move on. Signed him again on a free transfer. We managed to move him on to Celtic. Another one who just decided one day he was worthy of £60,000 in a Coventry team where the maximum wage we were paying at that point was around 33,000. Just the expectation as you move through the divisions just absolutely skyrockets, and he was never going to get the game time he wanted after that. So he became unhappy and again asked to leave. The next player was Coney de Winter. rock solid at the base of our championship winning team. Obviously, step up to the Premier League is a big thing. He has moved on to Norwich, but we did get 5.25 million for him, so it was a good deal for everybody involved. Jung Sang Bing has left. Again, he's another one that kind of guessed that he wasn't going to be involved as a first teamer, or certainly a regular starter in the first team. Asked to move on. He said he wanted a new challenge. He'd done everything he could with Coventry in the space of about a season and a half. So another one, we didn't stand in his way and we allowed him to move on. Fernandez, Wilson and John Patrick, they all went out on loan with Nathan Ferguson joining them. John Patrick, there is a little issue with him. He wants first team football, but again, I don't think he's going to be of a Premier League standard. So we've loaned him out now with a view to selling him on in the future, I think. So after all that business coming in, you can see we recouped £34.5 million. It meant that we had to go and strengthen the squad in most places. And the first thing we did was went and bought a centre midfielder. Now, this is going to be hopefully the linchpin of the Premier League campaign for this season. He is Mykola Shaparenko. He's a Ukrainian who has played for his national team 52 times. He has experience. Age 28, so the right age for a midfielder to be at the peak of his powers. We agreed to a star player playing time because he's going to be a first teamer, and he has had a solid season, I can tell you that much. Next player was Solly March. Obviously, we've already covered that with him going out. The next player we signed was Kofi Cow. He's a right back, and that is the reason why the other two right backs, Caceres and Ortega, were allowed to leave or go out on loan somewhere. Again, pace and acceleration and tackling were the main things behind this, and also the fact he was a free transfer that played into our decision making. The next player we signed was Anthony Alanga. Couldn't believe Manchester United had allowed him to leave. Probably hasn't developed as well as he looks like developing in real life. Does have 17 pace, does have 17 acceleration, does have 14 dribbling, and if we could just fine-tune a few of the other stats, I mean, he's 25 now. It does say he could still improve at the bottom there, but he's had issues himself along the season, but he was a real positive signing when we signed him in July. The next player we signed was Manuel Roffo for £3.2 million. He became our first choice goalkeeper. There was an injury to Sanchez, which meant that he was out for the first 3 months of the season. We had to go and pick up a goalkeeper, and Manuel Roffo fitted the bill. Former Boca Juniors player, playing for Tigre. The money was right. Wages were £30,000, so we didn't have to smash the bank. I mean, there are players that we're going to sign for more money later on this list, but needs must when we got to, like, January. So when we did get to January, once again, we went down the path of signing players with Premier League experience, the first of which was Che Adams. He did come in on £40,000 a week, so it is starting to creep up. He's a regular player who's in his prime years. As I said, Premier League experience with Southampton, played a lot of games, did score 63 in 263 games, so quite impressive for a Premier League record. I think that's quite good. We are going to play him as a left winger or a right winger. I don't think he's going to get in up top. We're going to try and use a bit of pace and acceleration that he has. The next player we signed was Yaya Callon, and again, this is another one that you're just going to be able to see straight away what we've done. Versatile player first and foremost, can play in a number of positions, then pace of 15, acceleration of 16, dribbling of 15, finishing of 12, first touch of 13. Work rate could be a bit better. Again, he scored 28 and 125 for Genoa, so if he can come in and replicate a little bit of that form for us, we would be happy. The next player we brought in was Valerio Crespi. He's a player that is on some wonderkid lists. He's 22 years old now. He's valued at 11 to 12 million pounds. We did sign him as an emergency backup player, which is actually quite impressive because I thought he was going to ask for a lot more. Coming on 33.5 grand though, so there is probably the chance that if he gets first team games and scores goals, he will ask for a bigger contract. And the final one that we needed to shore up the defence at the back was Max Kilman. He is 30 years old now, and he is a player who should be in his prime years. 6'4", good tackling, quick in terms of pace and acceleration. He has everything that we're going to need to be competitive, certainly in a Premier League defence. Pairing him alongside some of the other defenders, I think we've got a good partnership. he preferred foot is left, so he can always play on the left-hand side as well. Can be a makeshift left-back. So it was all there. The money was right. West Ham selling him to us for £7 million. So it meant that eventually, at the end of July, we had spent £30 million. In fact, in total, at the end of January is what I'm looking for. We had spent £30 million, recouped £34.5 million, and we had managed to overhaul the team in a sensible way that didn't break the bank. And speaking of the bank, let's have a little look at what is going on with the finances at the club then. So as I said, I didn't want to bankrupt the club, and I didn't want to do it unrealistically where we go and spend £80 million on one player, because Coventry just wouldn't do that. But we are now in a position where we are growing in stature, £71.2 million in the bank, £85 million available to us for season 6 in terms of a transfer budget. And we're going to get stuck now where realism kind of fades into the background a little bit. I'm still not going to go and buy Endrick or anybody like that, because that just doesn't happen. It wouldn't happen. But as Coventry are establishing themselves, we do need players with a bigger profile. £85 million is going to allow us to buy a decent amount of good players that are going to push the club forwards. Hopefully in season 6 we are going to progress further than what we have done in this season. In terms of the wage budget, we're spending £1.353 million. We have a wage budget now of 1.417, so there is a good gap there between those two numbers that allows us to go and try and attract the type of players that we're going to need in season 6. Let's quickly have a little look at the club vision tab. You can see our job security is very secure now. They have been impressed with what we have done across season 5. Looking at the actionable objectives, work within the wage budget, we're on course. Spend the original transfer budget. Now, I'm not too sure why this pops up in pretty much every game these days. The club want us to go out and spend £85 million, even though they've got 71 in the bank. I understand now that we're finishing higher in the league and we're a Premier League team again, there's more money coming in, but I don't really want to go out and bust the bank, so we'll tread carefully with that one. A little bit of giveaway here as to what has happened across the season, but you can see that they want to be competitive in the Champions League. Yes, competitive in the Champions League whilst avoiding relegation from the Premier League. So interesting that those two things go hand in hand. But looking at the board feedback then, the board are delighted with the leadership qualities we are demonstrating. Last season's successes remain fresh in our memories, and our appraisal of your current performance takes that into account. So they now want us to play possession football, entertaining football, and play high tempo pressing football, and we're doing okay with all three of those. Notable highlights across the season: pleased with the 3-2 win against Crystal Palace, fairly happy with the number of goals scored of late, pleased with the positive atmosphere in the changing room, disappointed about a 0-0 draw against Brighton. If we look at the supporters' feedback, we have an A- from the supporters. They want us to play possession football, play entertaining football, and play high tempo pressing football. They still want to be competitive against Leicester, and they only want us to attempt to avoid relegation from the Premier League. They're pleased with the 3-2 victory against Crystal Palace, pleased with the comprehensive 4-1 triumph against Brentford, pleased with the 2-0 win against Southampton, disappointed in Leonardo Zaminga's recent performances. He's a young player who will get better. Disappointed about a 0-0 draw against Brighton, disappointed with Zay Ivaldo's recent performances, and that is part of the reason why we signed Max Kilman. Okay, so we gave a little bit away there. A little bit of information cropped up in that Club Vision tab that exposed what has happened across the season. And you can see that we have managed to finish 5th in our second season back in the Premier League. Now, we were nowhere near the top guns. Liverpool finishing masses of points ahead of us. But we were close enough to Manchester City to only be 3 points behind. We were 7 points behind Newcastle and only 8 points behind Arsenal. And it meant that we were putting up a good fight in the Premier League across the season. We finished ahead of Manchester United, Tottenham and Chelsea, which I think is a massive, massive result. The FA Cup, we were knocked out in the third round by Wolves. And in the Carabao Cup, we got all the way to the final, where we faced off against Manchester City and unfortunately were toppled 3-1. If we go through some of the stages just to show you how we progressed. Second round, we beat Carlisle 2-0. Third round, we beat Everton on penalties. The fourth round, we beat Preston 2-1. The quarter-final stage, we beat Newcastle on penalties after a 1-1 draw. In the semi-finals, we beat Wolves 4-3 on aggregate. And then unfortunately, we got to the final, but we were no match for Manchester City. They beat us 3-1, and we almost had a repeat of 1987 with a domestic cup going to Coventry, but unfortunately it wasn't to be. If we have another look at the Premier League then and go into the stages as always and show you what happened, you can see that we played 38 games. We won 19 of them. We drew 10. We did lose 9. Scored 71 goals, which was quite impressive. We conceded 48. And we had a goal difference of 23, so that's better than last season also. Finished on a record high number of points for Coventry with 67. And as I said, we weren't too far behind Manchester City, Newcastle and Arsenal, but Liverpool were way, way out of reach. When we look towards the bottom, you can see that last season we were clear of it by a fair margin. This season we are massively away from it. We are now hopefully going to lose that tag of relegation fodder, and we're going to start to be able to be classed as a mid-table team. We are now 2 seasons in, so by the end of season 6 it'll be the 3rd season in the Premier League. Hopefully we can still progress. If we look at the profile screen then, you can see that across the season Erling Haaland did score 30 goals. Let's see where our top goal scorer was. Our top goal scorer was Joe Gelhardt. He got himself 15 goals. Anybody else on the list? There is not. We look at the average ratings. Erling Haaland led the way on that front with 7.54. We didn't get anybody on the list at all. In terms of assists, Rooney Bargy got himself 13 and finished just 1 behind Christopher Nkunku. And that really shows just how good Rooney Bargy is. I mean, it's not really the point where we show you the squad players, but just have a look at Rooney Bargy. He's a player that I can't believe we managed to get to Coventry for £10 million, and he's a player that is now leading the way in terms of the team. He's a star player, and he's the one player that we have broke the bank for. We renewed his contract to 31 and gave him £70,000 a week, which is massive amounts of money for Coventry. Player of the Match Awards, let's see, did we get anybody in there? Joe Gelhardt getting 4. Clean sheets, let's have a look. Manuel Roffo got 12 clean sheets across the season and finished in 6th place. Yellow cards, Hamer, Bogdanovic, Cow getting 17, 16 and 15. So discipline was a thing that we were really having to watch towards the end of the season. And then we don't have anybody in the bottom 3 stats there. So all in all, a fantastic second season back in the Premier League. Absolutely amazing to see Coventry City back in the mix with the likes of Manchester United, Manchester City, finishing above mighty Chelsea. Really was a stellar season for a second one back in the Premier League. Finally, let's have a little rundown of the squad then. Across the past season, this was our best 11. So Roffo was in goal, Flynn, Watts, Kilman and Cow. We then had Hamer, Hatate and Shaparanko in the middle of the park. Elanga wide left, Bargy wide right and Gelhardt at the top. So this is the team that managed to get 5th place in the Premier League. It's going to be difficult to improve this team, I think. There are certain positions where we might have to have upgrades though. Watts and Kilman are sound as centre-backs, but I do feel there is a little bit more in terms of quality that we could have. Hamer has been with us since the start of the save, so don't really want to replace him, but I do feel there's better options for defensive midfielders. The midfield 2, Hatate and Shaparenko have been fantastic. Elanga on the wide left, as I said, I can't believe Manchester United just let him go. We picked him up for nothing unless there is an absolute worldy option out there. Him and Rooney Bargy. Rooney Bargy, if we just keep hold of him, nobody comes along. I think, let's just have another look at him. If we look at his contract details, he does have a release clause of £68 million. So unless somebody comes along and pays £68 million, I think he will be here throughout the whole of Season 6. And he's a player that hopefully is going to drag the club forwards. I mean, he does have a release clause for relegation of 34, but that's really not happening at all. Joe Gelhardt at the top of the pitch. Only a real, should we call it, world-class striker is going to come and get in ahead of Joe Gelhardt. I mean, even Neil Maupay couldn't unlodge him from that spot. He kind of made it his own by the halfway point of the season. Looking at the strengths and the weaknesses then, youth prospects, a number of talented young prospects at the club. Left terrace, Constantino, Peter Slane and Jeff Thompson. Good through balls. Best player form, Joe Gelhardt, with 7.36 in his last 5 matches. We have good defence depth. We have good goalkeeping, defence, midfield, kicking, creativity. In terms of the weaknesses, marking, concentration, composure, long throws, leadership. Clear lack of leadership. Now, that's why I was buying experienced players, to try and lead by example on the pitch. Obviously, it hasn't happened with the players that I've bought, so I do need to go out there and maybe try and find a player that is going to be a clear leader of the dressing room. Crossing, handling, tackling, penalties, all the kind of standard things that we aren't really good at, but could be improved as we go along. Let's have a little look at the other version of the best 11 then. So, looking at this version, this is Matt Wowell's opinion. We've got Roffo in goal, Flynn, Watts, Kilman and Cow, Hamer, Hatate and Shaparenko, Alanga, Bargy and Gelhardt. So the exact same team as the previous report. Then looking at the players coming through, so we've got Reynolds in goal, Bayliss, Zaminga, Bogdanovic, Brody Hughes, Lucas Molinar, Hadland, Maitland, Andrade, Zephy and Quiroz Gardona. And that really makes sense because those are the players we poached. So we poached... where's he gone? Quiroz Gardona was on the list. Maitland, Hadland we poached from Chelsea. Who was the other player we poached? There was another player we poached. But it just shows that the players that we went out... Oh, it was the Cypriot Lefteris Constantino. So those kinds of players are showing up now in the reports, and it shows that if we were to continue this save on past the 6th season, those are the players that are going to pick themselves up and really progress on and hopefully be the future of Coventry City. Right then, that is pretty much Season 5 done. Plans for Season 6 will be put in place straight away. As I said, it's going to be difficult to try and replace some of these players, only if there are players available, probably on the transfer list. I'm not going to go and spend £80 million on one player, but I might spend £10 million on 8 players, if that works. Then again, do we need 8 players? Looking at the bigger picture of what the squad's going to look like. If the right player comes along, we will pick up the right player. Again, trying to make it as realistic as possible. Don't expect to see Endrick pop up in Season 6. It's not going to happen. He wouldn't sign for a Championship club. He's just signed for Real Madrid. So, yeah, it's not going to happen. But there are players out there that I think could be realistic. Especially with Coventry growing in stature, I think that we are going to have to try and build that next step to try and take the next step for the club, and that is exactly what we're going to try and do. Let's kick things off then by looking at some of the transfer activity that we had during Season 6. Now, obviously, it's a big season for the club. Just finished 5th in the Premier League and have qualified for the revamped version of the Champions League. That means we are going into the league phase, I think it is. So that is pretty interesting. It meant that we had to expand the squad and also move some of the old first teamers on that probably weren't going to cut it at this level and try and replace them with either younger models or more experience in terms of the Premier League. So looking at some of the players that have left the club then, the unimportant ones first. We had Richard Baker go to Fleetwood for $69,000. Tristan Bertanwi went to Exeter on loan. We had Demar Aubrey go to Hartlepool on loan. Charlie Hadland went to Oxford. Reece Russell-Denny went to Harrogate, and Harrison Dudziak went to Accrington, all on loan. And finally, in that section of the transfer window, Ezekiel Fernandez went to Sunderland on loan. This one, I think, was a pretty poor deal for the club. I think we paid around £4 million for him. We ended up letting him just walk away. He's probably going to be a good player for Sunderland in the Championship, but he just wasn't cutting it in the Premier League, and it meant that we could get him off the wage bill and give those wages to somebody else. So obviously a few first teamers also left the club during the window. Zivaldo was the first of which, £1 million. That took him to Watford, 31 years old. He had played some really good football for the club since he had been with us, but it just came to the time where it was like natural conclusion that he was going to be moved on, and we allowed him to go to Watford. Joining him at Watford was Max Lowe, a player that I never intended to be a first teamer. He was always going to be a rotation option, but did get a lot of first team football whilst at the club. We have managed to move him on for £1.7 million. The next one came as a bit of a shock to us. It's Anthony Alanga. Had him at the club for a single season. He has gone to FC Copenhagen. Came to us with a transfer request saying he wasn't getting enough first team football, wanted to be an important first team player, and we basically had him as a bit of a rotation option. We signed him for nothing, so nothing ventured, nothing gained. We did actually gain £9.25 million though, and that's one of those deals where I was saying that even if it kind of goes wrong when you are signing players on a free transfer and they have sell-on value, it always could work out in favour of the club. The next player to leave was Kofi Cow, another one, 30 years old now, and again, I think it just came to the natural progression of him being moved on. He was a firm first teamer when we were in the Premier League, I think last season, and then it just came to a point where I think we could just upgrade the player, so we decided to cash in whilst he had a value. So the players that have come in then, on the left hand side, we can see we started off by signing João Neves. He is a 23-year-old Portuguese midfielder or attacking midfielder who plays through the centre. We did not have to pay £21 to £26 million, which is what he's worth. We paid £1.9 million for him, and I think he's going to be an absolute bargain. The next player we did have to pay up for, it's Marcos Antonio. We paid Southampton £17.75 million for him, but it meant that we basically plugged a gap in the middle of the park. He's an upgrade on everything that we have, and I think he's going to be a midfield general for the team. The next player, £11 million spent on Alessandro Bungiano. Solid centre-back, can also cover at left-back. Think he's just going to slot right in and be a great first teamer for the club. We signed Jordan Osei Tutu. We signed him from Brighton. Another deal that led to Kofi Cow leaving is the fact that he's 29 years old, so a little bit younger, has international experience, also has Premier League experience, and we know that he's going to be a decent player slotting in on the right hand side. We signed Dyson Mender. Now this was a big deal. £25 million for Dyson Maeda. He's obviously, he wants to play as a pressing forward, as a striker at the top of the pitch, but we play with those two players that cut in from the wings. He can also play both of those positions, so I think there's rotation option for him, and also he could be deadly cutting in from the wings with 18 pace and 18 acceleration. We then signed Mason Holgate. Now I said I wanted to kind of reduce the age of the first teamers at the club, but this deal just made all kinds of sense. What did we pay for him? We paid £2.4 million for Mason Holgate. He comes to us with a whole host of experience of Premier League football. Managed to get him as a fringe player on £36,000 a week, and he will just be a stand-in for cup games, but also can be a leader in terms of developing youngsters. We then signed Josida from Sporting Lisbon. He does have a Valencia shirt on in the picture, but he comes in, he's 26 years old. He's going to be another cover for right back, and I think that is a no-brainer when you're picking players up for £475,000 that have great potential to be first teamers. Going on to the second part of that transfer window then, so into the July bit, before we get to the January transfers, we did let a few more first teamers go, first of which was Neil Mopai. He was a player that I couldn't really gauge. We signed him to score some goals. He did score some goals, but also he did have runs of games where he was just not scoring at all. Took the chance to get him off the wage bill. Another one that we didn't pay anything for, and we managed to get ourselves a deal of £8 million for Olympiacos. Gianluca Gaetano is next. He's a attacking midfielder left. He started complaining he wasn't getting enough first team football. Obviously we had picked him up to play and also be an experienced player at a top flight club. It didn't really work out for us, so we moved him on. £3.7 million for him. We did have a lot of loan deals. I'm not going to go through them all, but there are names such as Rodrigo Cesar went to Blackpool, Felix Ballas, Regen, went to Barnet. Yuta Nakayama is a player. He initially went out on loan to Plymouth, and then later on in that window he moved for free to Lincoln. That was in the January here. We also had Hidalgo go on loan to Lincoln, Nathan Ferguson to Wigan. There's a whole host of players. John Patrick went to Charlton on loan. As I said, Yuta Nakayama in the end went to Lincoln on a free. And then we had Lee Jonas, Jeff Thompson, James Bayliss, and Laurent Chiriac go to Yeovil on loan. So a lot of players leaving the club, specifically younger players to get loan and game time experience. And it meant that we finished off our transfer business both in June, July, and then just one transfer in January. So let's run through those quickly. First of which is Christian Schipendi. He is an Italian, 25 years old, going to be a rotation option at the top of the pitch. Now again, we've just moved Neil Maupay on. This is a younger version, I feel, of Neil Maupay. He only has 12 for pace and 13 for acceleration, but he does have 14 for finishing. Also has decent dribbling on him too, and has played for Cesena 170 times, scoring 38 goals. The next player we brought in was Fabio Carvalho on a free transfer, and what an absolute steal this is. Could not believe that Liverpool had let him go. We swooped in, picked him up. He's going to slot in on that left-hand side, can play on the right-hand side, can play as a forward, but his goals don't really scream out. He's a striker, but he can play there. We then signed Luka Jovic, and this was a big deal. £5.25 million is an absolute steal. Now, obviously, everybody remembers Luka Jovic from his failed time at Real Madrid, but since he's been at Fiorentina, he's played 127 games, scoring 29 goals. Maybe not the best of returns, but there's already a giveaway here that he does score a lot of goals for Coventry in the season that we have him. The final player and the biggest transfer of the save, we went to Aston Villa, one of our local rivals, and signed Jacob Ramsey. He can play as an attacking midfielder or a midfielder in the centre. Player that I personally like in real life. Maybe he's a little bit lightweight for what we need in the middle of our park for the positions that we play, but having spent all that money on him, we are going to throw him into the first team, and I can tell you that he does actually do a really good job. So in that part of the transfer window, we spent 31.5 million, we recouped 12 million, and there was a lot of shuffling and changing in the first team. Before we break down the impact of the transfers and what they had on the season, we're going to run through some finances now. Of course, we're not going to be at the club for the 7th season, but if we were at the club, this is how we left it. Now, if you imagine that when we first started, there was an overall balance of zero. I think we had around £170,000 in the transfer kitty in the first season, going up and up and up. And we've built the club up to basically where it is right now, with £89 million left in the bank. £66 million would be available in terms of a transfer budget. £1.8 million would be available for a wage budget. And you can see that the club is on course to pass financial fair play for both the Premier League and the Champions League. Let's have a little look at the club vision tab then. Actionable objectives, work within the wage budget, on course, spend the original transfer budget. The club were pleased. In terms of the 5-year plan going forward, now obviously, a little bit of a spoiler here. Club want to be competitive next season in the Champions League, so that means that we have qualified once again, and they want to become an established Premier League team. Now that is something that we have done, and I will show you in just a second with the competitions. Looking at the board feedback then, we get a B+ from the board. They're pleased with our leadership of the team, and last season's successes remain fresh in our memories, and our appraisal of your current performance takes that into account. So we're going to leave the club with a board culture that they wanted to play possession football. We were doing that. Play entertaining football. We certainly started to do that. Play high tempo pressing football. They were pleased with that. And they only want to sign players under the age of 23 for the first team. Now, we were able to achieve that on the whole, but to get the experience into the team that we needed, obviously signings like Ramsey and Jovic had to happen. So even though the reserving judgment, I think we were okay and we would have passed that. Looking at the notable highlights then, pleased with the 1-0 victory over Everton, fairly happy with the number of goals scored of late, and pleased with the positive atmosphere in the changing room, disappointed about a defeat against Leeds, and disappointed about a heavy defeat against Arsenal. Quickly checking in with the supporters, a B+ there too. Overall, they are pleased with the job we are doing, and again they wanted possession football, entertaining football, high tempo pressing football, want to finish above Leicester in the league. You'll see what happened there in a minute, and attempt to avoid relegation from the Premier League. Again, you'll see what happened there in just a minute. Their notable highlights: 2-2 draw with Newcastle. Peter Andrade's recent performances, he has broken through into the first team, and they're fairly happy with the number of goals scored of late. Disappointed with Zarko Bogdanovic's recent performances, disappointed with Rooney Bargi's recent performances, and disappointed with Shane Flynn's recent recent performances once I put my teeth back in. So come towards the end of the season, those three players kind of didn't down tools, but they made it very clear that Rooney Bargy certainly wanted out of the club. He thinks that Coventry aren't big enough for him anymore, and that is probably a fair assessment of where he is. Zarko Bogdanovic, once he reaches that kind of age, will also have the same opinion. So it's pretty fair from the supporters. Moving on into the competitions tab, we can reveal that we have secured a third place finish in the Premier League, and that is the highest position that we have finished in the save. Looking at it, we only finished a point behind Chelsea. We were 10 points behind Liverpool, and looking at the league positions, you can see that we at one point were top of the table. We sat in second for such a long way in the season. We did drop to third towards the end. We even dropped down to fourth, but managed to secure a third place finish. In the Champions League, we managed to get through to the round of 16, and we were knocked out by Manchester City. We were also knocked out in the FA Cup by Everton in the third round, and we were runners-up in the Carabao Cup. So let's start off with the Carabao Cup, and we can show you that we lost in the final 3-1 to Leeds. That is 2 seasons in a row that we have made the final of a domestic cup and fallen at the final hurdle. It's a shame, really. We were so close to getting our hands on the silverware, but once again it just came up short. Let's look at the Champions League. If we go to the league phase, you can see that we finished in 15th place in the league phase. We played 8, we won 5 games. We didn't draw any. We lost 3. We only had a goal difference of 2, but we secured 15 points, which meant that we made it out of that. We went into the knockout playoff round. We beat Real San Sebastian on penalties after drawing 4-4 on aggregate. And then in the round of 16, we came up against Manchester City and we lost on penalties after a 3-3 draw on aggregate. If we go back to the Premier League then, let's break down and show you exactly what happened. If we go into the stages tab first, you can see third place finish, playing 38 games. We have won 22 of them. We drew 5. We lost 11. We scored 61 goals, conceded 46, only had a 15 goal difference, which sounds bad, but when you look underneath, Manchester City here had 14 goal difference, and we actually finished level on points with Manchester City, but that one solitary goal managed to put us above them in the league. We finished a point behind Chelsea. We finished 10 points behind Liverpool. If we look at the profile, you can see Luka Jovic fired us into that position, really, scoring 26 goals across the season. In terms of average ratings, he was our highest average rater with a 7.22, finishing 7th overall. Fabio Carvalho came into the club and provided 10 assists. Luka Jovic managed to get 10 Player of the Match awards. Let's have a little look at some clean sheets. So Manuel Roffo getting 12 clean sheets across the season. Yellow cards, luckily for us this season, wasn't too bad for the discipline. Distance covered per 90 minutes. Did we have a player on that list? No, we did not. Tackles per 90 minutes. We also did not have a player there. And finally, dribbles per 90 minutes. We do not have a player in the top 20 there either. So, a successful season, really, when you think about the size and stature of the club and how we have had to build our way into contention. Just becoming a Premier League team was tough. Establishing ourselves as a Premier League team. Obviously, we finished 5th last season. We have now finished 3rd. We've got to the last 16 of the Champions League, and we are runners-up in the Carabao Cup. The last thing that I'm going to look at before I wrap this video up is how the squad would look when I pass it over to the next manager. Now, if you consider where we have come from in the save, I know that there are fans out there that are dedicated to the team and badly didn't want me to sell certain players and move players on, but the way that it works is obviously we need to upgrade. And if you compare the team that we had at the start to this team, you can see exactly why those first teamers earlier on in the game had to be moved on, had to be sacrificed, because we're going to leave a team that looks like this. So we'll have Roffo in goal, Flynn, Kilman, Buongiorno and Osei Tutu. Marcus Antonio as a defensive midfielder, Shaparenko and Jacob Ramsey in the middle, with Fabio Carvalho, Rooney Bargi and Luka Jovic up top. Looking at the strengths and weaknesses as we leave the team, top goal scorer Luka Jovic, 26 goals in the Premier League last season. The youth prospects that we are leaving behind, Samuel Dobson, Lefteris Constantino and Isaac Abdul-Razak. We're effective from through balls, we have defensive depth, we have good midfield, we have eccentricity in our goalkeepers, and best player form, Luka Jovic has been in fantastic form with an average rating of 7.2 in his last 5 matches. In terms of the weaknesses left at the club, marking, positioning, teamwork, long throws, crossing, concentration, aerial reach, handling, passing. So obviously there are a few left behind too, but if we were going into that next season, those are the kinds of things I'd be asking the scouts to look for, 1 or 2 players that can improve at least a few of those areas. Let's look at the other best 11. So you can see Matt Wells goes with this one. So we'll have Roffo in goal, Shane Flynn, Buongiorno, Kilman and Osei Tutu. So that's exactly the same back four and goalkeeper. Marcos Antonio, Shaparenko, Jacob Ramsey. You'd have Kevin Zeffi on the left instead of Fabio Carvalho, which is quite interesting. You'd have Rooney Bargi on the right and then Luka Jovic at the top. And then again, to look at some of the youth prospects, we'd have Reynolds in goal, Bayliss, Zaminga, Bogdanovic, Brody Hughes, Chris Alistair, Lucas Milinar, Joe Neves. Then on the left, Isaac Moore. On the right, Andrade and Quiroz Ganda at the top of the pitch. So all in all, we're leaving behind a squad that is great for the here and now. But also, if we were to come back in 5 years' time, I'm pretty sure if they can hold on to some of these kids that we've signed, certainly those from the next gen top 50, this club would be absolutely flying. But that is where we are going to leave it. We have got Coventry to a 3rd place in the Premier League. We have been to the final of 2 domestic cups. Unfortunately, not added any silverware to the trophy cabinet. In the top flight, we did win the championship to get back into the Premier League, which was absolutely fantastic. Coventry City are a fantastic club. In real life, they are so poorly run. I hope and pray Mike Ashley does not get his grubby little mitts on it. Hope he doesn't run it into the ground so that every Coventry fan has to buy a massive Sports Direct mug and a Sports Direct bag that you can fit your house in, and he upsells everything to them. Hope he just leaves the club alone, lets them play their club football. Yeah, it's such a fantastic club with such a heritage that to have him there would just absolutely ruin it. In terms of the game, moving them on from where they were, there were periods where we were in constant transfer embargoes because of the takeovers. The club was being sold, then it fell through, and then it was sold, then it fell through. Finally, once the stability came to the club and we were able to get the cash in, we were able to develop a team that would go on and win the championship, and then we can further go on and develop that into a Premier League team that has now finished 3rd. And I'm pretty sure if we were to continue the save and go on, it would get even better going forwards. The finances are now in a healthy state. The security around the club, obviously, they could sell a few of the stars. Rooney Bargi could go for big money. Luka Jovic probably won't demand a massive fee, but if he keeps scoring goals, he will be one that surely will fire the club forwards. You've got the likes of Fabio Carvalho, he could be sold on. We are going to leave the club in such a fantastic state, which is absolutely not the case when we took it over. Again, I'm going to say they are a fantastic club. They just need somebody to go in there, give it a bit of love and care. And this is a team that I'm pretty sure if they can build upon it, they're a big team. They should be back in the Premier League. And I just hope that they get the right people to make that happen. Right then, I'm going to wrap this one up. If you're still at this point of the video, firstly, a big thank you. Secondly, if you haven't hit the like and subscribe button, please consider doing so. It's been so fantastic watching the channel grow across the past couple of months. Really appreciate all the time and effort that everybody puts into interacting, whether it be just a like or a comment or a suggestion for a tactic or something else that we can do on the channel. Speaking of the channel, don't forget there's other videos. There's Let's Plays, Tactics, Wonder Kids. We have a little bit of something for everybody on the channel. But for this one, I'm going to wrap it there. Thank you for watching the Coventry City Rebuild.